Chapter 2589. Jinn Capital, Hero Gambling House. At this moment, the people in Hero Gambling House were like boiling water. The clamor completely drowned the heavens and the earth. And in the gambling house, every pair of eyes fell on the young man in his 20s in the middle of the gambling house. Every one of them was waiting to see this young man chop off his left hand. This Sima Lang is really crazy. He lost all his family assets, lost his wife, lost everything, and now he's gambling with his life. Doesn't he know that Hero Gambling House cheats? He's just a playboy who walks his dog and plays cockfights all day long. He's domineering and arrogant, causing trouble everywhere. He harmed innocent people and angered his father to death. What does he know? You don't understand. If Hero Gambling House didn't cheat, he wouldn't be here. He's a man who wants to be the god of gamblers. The gambling house was full of gamblers who often came here to play. Who didn't know each other? Especially Sima Lang. Who didn't know him? Who didn't know him? And in the gambling house, there weren't any good things. So not only did they lack sympathy, they also hated people for not fighting for their rights. They even hoped that the matter wouldn't be blown up. Haha. So, when Sima Lang's lofty ideals came out, the gambling house burst into laughter. Originally, Sima Lang was holding a shiny knife and was about to chop off his hand. However, when he heard that someone was actually mocking his unparalleled ideals, he was instantly enraged. He immediately pointed the knife in his hand at a person not far away and directly slashed at him. Immediately, a blood-curdling scream resounded. It was extremely miserable, like the scream of a pig before it was killed. It was frightening. No wonder he was like that. Because he was very miserable after Sima Lang's knife cut his shoulder, he was soaring inwards bit by bit. Is it funny? Sima Lang laughed sinisterly. He was extremely fierce, like a madman, a demon, lawless and unrestrained. Many people were shocked. However, there were also many people in the gambling house who weren't surprised by Sima Lang's behavior. They smiled and looked at the scene with interest. Laugh. Why don't you laugh? If you don't laugh, the atmosphere won't be good. The clamor of the gambling house had completely disappeared. After Sima Lang noticed it, he spoke in a strange tone, causing people to shudder involuntarily. Laugh, laugh. He roared, I told you to laugh, did you hear me? Sima Lang seemed to be worried that he wasn't fierce enough, that he wasn't fearless enough, and that he wasn't lawless enough to slash people with his saber. With a sudden movement, he lifted the saber in his hand and pulled it out. Then, he ferociously slashed at the person who was slash. In an instant, it was as if he was cutting a small wooden stick. He felt the resistance on the knife slightly, and then he felt that everything was suddenly connected, and a head was immediately chopped off. Guru guru. The head rolled on the ground, and wherever it passed, everyone immediately dodged. The ground was also dyed red. Bang! The headless corpse fell to the ground, and the blood that spurted out dyed the gambling house red. The smell of blood and chi filled the entire place. This lunatic, Sima Lang is a lunatic. Didn't that person just laugh a little? He actually killed that person with a single slash. As expected of Sima Lang, he's really crazy. He doesn't have any scruples when doing things. Everyone in the gambling house had different thoughts. Many people were frightened and felt their scalps go numb. However, there were also many people who felt that this was getting more and more interesting, because someone finally died. It was only interesting when someone died. Chapter 2590. What? Isn't this enough? How about this? In the gambling den, how many people could laugh when faced with such a situation? Sima Lang didn't hear any laughter for a long time, and no one praised him for being fierce and crazy. He was even more dissatisfied. So, he suddenly slashed again and rushed into the crowd with his sword. He slashed anyone he saw. After slashing 7 or 8 people, he smiled and said to the crowd, Is this enough? Ha. The sound of laughter finally rang out. A small number of people laughed in an incomparably carefree manner, but the majority of people laughed in an extremely forced manner. Sima Lang was very satisfied with the forced expressions of many people. He smiled and said, I like it when you're afraid and afraid, haha. He laughed wildly. As he laughed, He raised his sword and chopped off his left hand and threw it on the gambling table. It was scary to look at. Not only did this lunatic not care about other people's lives, he also didn't seem to care about his own life. It was so scary that it was scary. The entire crowd was silent. The dealer opposite Sima Lang only sneered as he watched this scene. There was not a trace of fear in his heart. He had seen people like Sima Lang who had lost everything and was on the brink of insanity. It was not as if he had not seen people like him who committed murder and played tricks. How could he be scared? Sima Lang was definitely not the first, and definitely not the last. However, he had to admit that Sima Lang's fierceness and craziness were the most shocking he had ever seen. Is this enough? Don't you think the bet is a little small? The banker sneered. How about betting on your head? If you lose, cut off your own head. If you win, you can win back everything you lost. When the banker reached out and pointed at Sima Lang's head, he sneered in his heart. Sima Lang was a lunatic who killed people in the gambling den. He definitely wouldn't let Sima Lang walk out alive. However, there were many ways to kill people. This was naturally one way. Although it would still affect the gambling den's reputation, it would also tell everyone that they could play freely in the gambling den of heroes. They could play as crazily as they wanted, but they didn't have the guts to do so. Moreover, life and death were like child's play. This kind of gambling den was a real man's gambling den. It was exciting enough. Hee hee. Sima Lang laughed weirdly. This kind of gambling is very exciting. It seems that my head is still very useful. Haha. He said crazy things, terrifying things, and in the end, he suddenly laughed crazily, causing people to tremble even more. He even shouted, "This is too exciting. This is too exciting. Hurry up, I can't wait to feel my head being moved." At this time, the Zhuang family's pupils finally shrunk slightly. He knew that this Sima Lang before him truly did not want to live anymore. "All right, as you wish." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the gambling house was ignited again. Many people watched this scene without blinking. Bet on the dice, bet on the size. Sima Lang was betting big. Accompanied by the sound of the dealer shaking the dice, the smoky gambling house became quieter and quieter. Bang! The dealer shook the dice and the GU fell. "Sima Lang, I'll give you one more chance. Are you betting big or small?" The Zhuang family looked at Sima Lang and spoke, giving him another chance. However, Sima Lang did not appreciate it at all. "Cut the crap and open the door for me, as you wish." The Zhuang family laughed coldly and opened the GU. Immediately, the 3 dice were revealed. The side of the 3 dice that was facing up had a red dot that was very eye-catching. The numbers were all 1, and the number was 3. Small dot. The Zhuang family won. The outcome was decided. Chapter 2591. Sima Lang, you've lost. The dealer revealed his white teeth and smiled. However, at this moment, his white teeth were so white that they looked like they wanted to eat someone. It was inexplicably scary. Haha. When Sima Lang heard the dealer's ridicule, he immediately laughed wildly. "What are you being so arrogant for? Do you think that I, Sima Lang, can't afford to lose?" After a pause, he laughed strangely at the dealer. "In terms of gambling skills, you actually dare to say that I can't win against you? How interesting. Hey." All of a sudden, his smile became extremely strange and frightening. Although no one in the gambling house could understand why they had such a feeling, they had such a feeling. Especially when Sima Lang put the knife on his neck and used the knife to cut his own neck bit by bit. Bit by bit, he cut his own head off. It was extremely terrifying, causing everyone to tremble in fear, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. This madman. The dealer was completely terrified. He had seen many unreasonable people in the gambling house, many people who didn't care about their lives, but he had never seen someone like Sima Lang. He had also never seen a person holding a knife and slowly cutting his own neck bit by bit, cutting his own head off. Hee hee. Along with the last strange laugh, Sima Lang finally cut his own head off completely. Blood spurted out from the wound. Bang! Sima Lang's corpse fell to the ground, but his head was still on the ground, rolling around with a gulu-gulu sound. Silence, a deathly silence. In the gambling house, because of this, The gamblers who didn't care about their lives in the past were inexplicably terrified when they saw Sima Lang's corpse. Their bodies trembled. They shouldn't be afraid, but they didn't know why they were scared to death at this moment. Suddenly, a strange wind blew out of nowhere in the gambling house. It was a blood-red wind, causing the gambling house to be in chaos and panic. Ghost, ghost. The ghost is here. Sima Lang has turned into a ghost and returned. It was unknown who shouted out the word ghost, but this seemed to be the understanding of fear in the gambling house. At the same time, incomparably mournful screams rang out from within the gambling house. When the crowd looked over, they saw that the banker who was gambling with Sima Lang was inexplicably crazily screaming miserably. Soon after, they saw a small blade slicing the flesh off the banker's body bit by bit. In just an instant, the Zhuang family's entire body was drenched in blood. He seemed to have been immobilized by an inexplicable force and could not move at all. All he could do was allow the small knife to slowly slice and dice him alive, over and over again. He shuddered in fear. What Sima Lang said before he died had happened. The people in the gambling house were even more panicked. They wanted to rush out of the gambling house, but they couldn't. They could only watch this scene in panic and tremble. At this moment, the madman in the gambling house, Sima Lang, was sitting on the main seat like a great emperor sitting high up in the 9 levels of heaven. Beside his feet was an elegant middle-aged man who was kneeling there like a puppy. "Master, the results of the imperial examinations in Taijing are out." The elegant middle-aged man was very careful when he spoke. This was because his master, who played games in the human world, had lost again this time. He hated the hero gambling house to the core. Especially at this time, he had to report to his master about the terrible situation in Taijing. Who didn't know that the first prince of Jinju was temperamental and cruel? Those people in the hero gambling house were simply courting death. Oh, tell me, what's the result? Chapter 2592. That country bumpkin Chu Yang won both the civil and martial examinations in Taijing City. Song Tangming is only one of his identities, so it can be said that he is invincible in both civil and martial matters. Thus, it should be much easier for him to propose marriage at Duke Ju's residence. At the very least, the scholarly middle-aged man couldn't find any reason to refuse. He couldn't find any fault with Chu Yang's performance either. Thus, he thought that Duke Ju's residence was more or less the same. Of course, he also used the fastest time to convey as much bad news as possible to the first prince. Then, he waited with great fear, waiting for the first prince's thunderous rage. He was even prepared to die. However, to his surprise, the first prince actually laughed happily when he heard this. He said in an incomparably relaxed tone, "Does this mean that my woman is going to be snatched away by someone else?" "You can roughly say that." The scholarly middle-aged man was slightly stunned. After a moment of ecstasy, he fell into an even greater panic. The first prince's actions could very well mean that there was an even more terrifying storm to come. This wasn't the first time such a thing happened. The scholarly middle-aged man had encountered it once before. Ever since he came to the first prince's side, he didn't know how long he could live. In any case, those who served the first prince definitely wouldn't be able to live long. "Are you very surprised? Are you very frightened?" Huangfu Wuji seemed to have seen through everything. He suddenly looked at the scholarly middle-aged man with a sinister smile. The scholarly middle-aged man couldn't help but tremble. He repeatedly begged for mercy. "Master, please spare me, spare me." Huangfu Wuji seemed to have a slight headache when he saw the scholarly middle-aged man's reaction. He couldn't help but rub his forehead and say, "I seem to have failed a little. Everyone is afraid of me, so what can I do?" After a pause, he said, "Don't worry. You will definitely live for more than a year. You will definitely live for a very, very long time. Even if I accidentally kill you, I will definitely revive you." "Thank you, Master." The scholarly middle-aged man could do nothing but kneel down and express his gratitude. He only hoped that his luck would not be too bad today. As for living a long, long life, he was absolutely not willing at all. Staying by the side of such a lunatic, he might as well die early and reincarnate early. "Now, let me explain another problem to you." As Huangfu Wuji spoke, he couldn't help but look in the direction of Thai capital. He smiled and said, "Women should be snatched from others or fought fiercely with others. That's the only way to get them. Otherwise, what's the point of playing with a woman who throws herself at you all the time?" The scholarly middle-aged man roughly understood. Naturally, he didn't dare to make any decisions. He only asked for instructions. "Master, what should we do now?" "What should I do?" He. Huang Fu Xian suddenly laughed strangely. "If I attack now, it will be meaningless. Let's see how Duke Ju and the rest will react first. If they agree to this marriage, wouldn't it be very interesting if I appear at that time?" He paused for a moment before a cold sneer appeared on his lips. "If Duke Ju and the others agree to it, I'll kill a few people during their wedding ceremony. Wouldn't that make the wedding even more red? Furthermore, wouldn't it be even more wonderful if it was the wedding night for me to represent the wedding night?" At the start, he was talking nicely and acting like he was going to fight with Chu Yang for Shangguanlan. However, in the blink of an eye, Huang Fu Wuji revealed his cruel nature. Although the scholarly middle-aged man shuddered at this, he could understand it very well. The reason for this was because Duke Ju's residents obviously knew that he, Huang Fu Wuji, liked Shangguanlan. However, they dared to ignore him and directly marry Shangguanlan to Chu Yang. He definitely couldn't tolerate this. The meaning behind this was very simple. If Duke Ju gave him face, he would play. However, if Chu Yang was here, he would definitely know the exact reason. This wasn't as simple as Duke Ju giving him face. This was a question of whether Duke Ju had the intention to rebel. "Master, you mean that we should bide our time? Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo, they definitely wouldn't be doing nothing at all. Am I right?" Hearing this, the scholarly middle-aged man immediately said, "After they heard about what happened in Thai capital, they have already headed to Thai capital." Chapter 2593. One wrong step would lead to many wrong steps. In the end, he would be consigned to eternal damnation and die without a proper burial. In the face of the impending disaster, Chu Yang was very worried. He was even more cautious. He looked for a way again and again, but in the end, he still couldn't find an effective way, let alone a foolproof way. But he still braced himself. This day was the noon of the 8th day after the martial examination in Taijing City. After 7 days and 7 nights, he finally appeared in Taijing City in front of everyone again. The moment he appeared, a huge commotion broke out among the crowd. At first, Chu Yang didn't care much about it. But he heard that Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo of Jindu had arrived early in the morning. Moreover, they had been waiting for him for nearly 7 days and 7 nights. Suddenly, his face turned dark. Damn it! He cursed fiercely in his heart. He thought about it for 7 days and 7 nights. After repeatedly pondering and deducing, he finally made a difficult decision. However, from the very beginning, things were completely out of his expectations. In the 9 reincarnations, Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo, who had never appeared before, were actually chosen at this time. This was no different from being hit in the back of the head with a brick the moment he stepped out of the door. There was definitely nothing worse than this. Could it be that because I delayed for so long before heading to Duke Ju's residence, my fate has changed? His fate had always followed his every move and was constantly changing. There had never been a fixed fate. Therefore, even if he had thought too much before, no matter how thoughtful he was, perhaps because of a small change, or as long as he made a very small mistake, perhaps his fate would be completely out of his control, consigned to eternal damnation, and die without a burial place. His heart became even more gloomy, especially when such a change occurred at such a critical juncture when he was heading to Duke Ju's residence. It was extremely dangerous. It could be said that at this juncture, as long as he made the slightest mistake, the consequences would be unimaginable. There's no turning back. Chu Yang hated Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo to the extreme. Then, he hardened his heart and said angrily in his heart, "I don't believe that I can't change this fate, that I can't reverse it." Because of his anger, his footsteps became much faster. Chu Yang is here. The god of fraud is here, but his expression is very bad, as if someone owes him a lot of money. It would be strange if the pit god's complexion was good. If it was you, it wouldn't be good. Isn't that so? It wasn't easy for him to pass the imperial examinations, and he thought that he could finally win the heart of a beauty. Just as he was about to happily visit her, someone came to block his way. It would be strange if he was in a good mood. Chu Yang saw two white and slender figures in front of him amidst the commotion. They were very tall and majestic. They seemed to have cut off the long river of history as they stood there. His white robes were peerless, and his temperament was extraordinary, ethereal and carefree. If the 6 great young masters of Taijing City were like cranes in a flock of chickens, then in front of these two figures, the 6 great young masters of Taijing City could only be chickens, ugly chickens at that. These two people didn't need any introduction. Chu Yang knew that they were Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo. Beside them, Huang Fuxian, Shangguan Can, Chen Buchuan, Xie Xiubua, and Wang Lingyun were chatting happily. The moment Chu Yang appeared, they stopped talking. Chapter 2594. The first thing that Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo noticed was Chu Yang's angry eyes. However, Huang Fuxian and the rest noticed the change in Chu Yang's aura. They had not seen him for a few days, but they realized that Chu Yang's aura had become extremely ancient, as though he had experienced the vicissitudes of life. His entire body was filled with the aura of time. The aura of time was so ancient and so heavy. It was as though he had seen everything in the world and experienced the birth and death of epochs. Hence, he was already clear about the ruthlessness of the world and the impermanence of the world. Hence, he was filled with anger. This country bumpkin must have gained a great understanding from this epiphany. His strength must be even more shocking. The aura of time on his body is so thick. He must have gone through reincarnation. However, even if he had, he shouldn't have such a thick aura of time. This aura of time doesn't have a trace of decay or death. It feels very new. Huang Fuxian and the other 4 naturally had different perspectives. But they had one thing in common: the 5 of them were shocked beyond belief. And they were very sure that Chu Yang had made astonishing progress. It was more accurate to say that they were no longer Chu Yang's match. They were not at the same level as Chu Yang, but at the same level as Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo. In fact, the 5 of them had a feeling that even Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo wouldn't be a match for Chu Yang. Chu Yang had changed too much. Of course, Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo could sense the thick aura of time on Chu Yang's body. However, they had never seen Chu Yang before and thought that Chu Yang had always been like this. Hence, although they were surprised, they did not think as much as Huang Fuxian and the rest did. The god of trickery is angry. His pair of eyes are about to spit fire. I can guarantee that there will be a good show to watch. The 2 from Jinju are not comparable to the 6 great young masters of the Grand Capital. Why do I feel that the god of trickery is going to kick 2 iron plates this time? Those 2 are indeed extraordinary. That Qin Guo is a descendant of Qin Sheng, the patriarch of the way of Confucianism. Kong Jingsha's background is no less than Qin Guo's. Our heavenly soul world's martial arts system was developed by the Kong family. Think about it, the realms that we talk about are all developed by the Kong family. How amazing is that? There was only anger in Chu Yang's heart. He couldn't hear anything and didn't care about anything. Even though he knew that Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo were exceptional, he still didn't put them in his eyes. Because even if they were exceptional, they were nothing compared to the Jin Emperor. At this moment, there was only one enemy in his eyes, the Jin Emperor. A good dog doesn't block the way. Scram! Before he even arrived, he had already shouted furiously at Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo from afar, causing an uproar in the crowd. When Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo heard such words, there was no anger on their jade-like faces. Their hearts were calm, elegant, and noble. They were proud but not arrogant. There was not a trace of arrogance in them. It could be said that when one looked at the 2 of them, one could not help but feel reverence, caution, and trepidation. It was as if one was a subject facing his emperor. These 2 seemed to be men above men. They were completely different from ordinary people. They seemed to be living in a high-level world, and were even more high-level creatures. They were no longer ordinary creatures or ordinary humans. You are Chu Yang from the Eastern Wilderness. Chapter 2595. Chu Yang was slightly surprised. Such a person seemed to be extremely extraordinary. He had no choice but to restrain his anger. He didn't want to act recklessly and cause things to spiral out of his control. What happened now was even more different from the future he had predicted. Kong Jingsha or Qin Guo. His voice was very cold. Kong Jingsha, get straight to the point. Kong Jingsha, show me what you're capable of. Straightforward. Kong Jingsha flicked his sleeves and said calmly, Chu Yang, your attainments in couplets are very shocking. I want to experience it. Hua. The crowd immediately went into an uproar. They were clamoring endlessly. They had never expected that Kong Jingsha would challenge Chu Yang in this aspect. And he had specifically chosen Chu Yang's strongest point. Many people felt that it was inconceivable. After all, Chu Yang's foundation in couplets was simply shocking. It could be said that no one could compare to him. To put it in a typical example, there was definitely someone who didn't know about this. Who didn't know that it had once caused the entire central region to fall silent? Chu Yang wasn't very surprised. He was only angry. Kong Jingsha clearly wanted to ruthlessly defeat him. Please, he wasn't in the mood to get entangled with Kong Jingsha. In fact, he was even too lazy to say anything. So, he directly invited Kong Jingsha. And this made everyone on the side very surprised. After all, this was very unlike him. Please, Kong Jingsha also extended his hand to invite Chu Yang. His words and actions were very proper. The cultivation that was revealed from his bones made people feel admiration and admiration. You're the challenger. Don't you know the rules? Kong Jingsha heard Chu Yang's ridicule and smiled. He immediately said, tasting spring tea, 3 mouthfuls of plain water, Zhuxian nunnery, 2 mountain men. Kong Jingsha came up with a split couplet. He split tasting into 3 mouthfuls and spring into plain water. Such a couplet wasn't easy to understand. But when many people were still thinking about how to match it, they heard Chu Yang's voice in their ears. They had already heard the answer. Suddenly, they couldn't help but be surprised. So popular. These two were clearly at odds with each other. However, many people admired Chu Yang even more in their hearts. That was because his mind was so sharp. He immediately came up with an answer after hearing such a couplet. It was simply amazing. At this moment, Kong Jingsha couldn't help but frown. Beside him, Qin Guo's gaze turned solemn. The rumored Chu Yang was indeed not simple. From the very beginning, they had felt an extremely sharp aura, an invincible aura facing the two of them. Who could have such ability? These two were not bragging. Generally speaking, no matter how outstanding a person was, in front of the two of them, they could not help but be a head shorter. However, the Chu Yang in front of them was not intimidated by them at all. He was not a head shorter than them, and was even taller than them by a head. He wanted Kong Jingsha to go first, and this was the best example. Of course, Chu Yang's couplet was also very clever. The word Zhu was split into 2 das, and the word Xian was split into 2 shans, and the word Shan was split into 2 shans. After Kong Jingsha recovered from his shock, he quickly answered, Lotus Seed's heart is bitter. Lia's stomach is sour. Chu Yang instantly clashed with him again. In this harmonious couplet, Lotus Seed's heart is bitter. Because Lian could communicate with Lian, it had 2 meanings. First, it meant that Lotus Seed's heart was bitter. Second, it meant that she pitied her son's heart. Chu Yang matched all of them perfectly. Lia could communicate with Li. His sentence also had 2 meanings. First, Lia's heart is sour. Second, Lia's stomach is sour because of separation. It was a perfect match. What was more shocking was that if one didn't notice the homophones, many people would only match the first meaning, and not the second meaning. They would immediately be defeated. Chapter 2596. Chu Yang, what a great guy. Kong Jingsha's heart was in turmoil. He was even a little stunned. His plan had been seen through so easily by Chu Yang. Qin Guo, who was at the side, couldn't help but clench his fists at this time. He felt a great pressure from Chu Yang, and he almost couldn't breathe. Oh my god, that's so fast. I haven't heard it clearly, and you've already given the second half of the couplet, Kangshan. Do you dare to slow down a little? That's right, Kangshan, you don't have to work so hard to prove that we're fools. Your intelligence and omnipotence have long been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Please let us participate at the side and give us some time to be shocked. Oh my God, this lotus seed is bitter. There's a trap here, but Kung Shen didn't fall for it. As expected of Kung Shen, he's sharp in this aspect. That's for sure. Why don't you take a look at who that is? The famous Kung Shen. The surrounding people were so noisy that Kong Jingsha had no choice but to stop temporarily and think of a countermeasure at the same time. Among the crowd, most of them were amazed by Chu Yang's speed. Later on, when they found out that there was a trap in the couplet, they became even more noisy. This naturally made Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo realize that Chu Yang seemed to be very popular among the crowd. Huang Fu Xian, Shangguan Can, Xie Xiubua, and the other four were also a little stunned. Just from the 2 rounds of confrontation between Chu Yang and Kong Jingsha, they realized that Kong Jingsha was amazing, but they also realized that Chu Yang was a monster. This is simply a monster. I didn't lose to him unjustly. I won't be embarrassed if I tell others about it in the future. Rui Zi, who was in the crowd, completely lost his temper at this time. In such a quick answer, Kung Chu was actually able to identify the trap in an instant. It was really amazing. Literature and martial arts were essentially the same. What Kong Jingsha had just done was as if he had executed a brilliant move. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see through the brilliance or trickery behind it and would definitely be caught off guard. However, Chu Yang had instantly seen through it. Therefore, from this point of view, Chu Yang was not only a master of the literary path, but also a master of the martial path. He was truly proficient in both the pen and the sword. Hai Shui Jiao 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 Luo. After the surrounding voices died down slightly, Kong Jingsha spoke again. As soon as he said this, he said fiercely in his heart, I don't believe that you, Chu Yang, can match it in an instant. This kind of couplet contained a lot of skills. Without a long time to think about it, it was impossible to match it. Humph. Chu Yang sensed Kong Jingsha's thoughts and snorted coldly. Then, he said, floating clouds grow and fade. Shua. Kong Jingsha's face changed greatly, and he suddenly became incomparably pale. For the first time, he lost his composure, elegance, and nobility. He looked at Chu Yang in disbelief. This kind of couplet, Chu Yang actually managed to match it in an instant. Moreover, the answer seemed to be better than the one in his heart. How is this possible? How is this possible? For the first time, he lost his composure. For the first time, he felt inferior. He was anxious and uneasy. He had a feeling that something was wrong and that he was going to be defeated. Kong Jingsha wasn't the only one who had this kind of mentality. Qin Guo also had this kind of mentality. He was also extremely proficient in the literary path, and his reaction was even greater. When he saw this scene, his mind directly exploded with a buzzing sound. It was blank, and he almost completely lost his mind. Chapter 2597. What kind of stupid couplet is this? Is it an overlapping couplet or a harmonizing couplet? After repeating so many words, it feels very difficult. There must be a huge trap somewhere. There must be a trap, and it must be a huge trap. It's just that we can't think of it at the moment. Everyone, hurry up and think. Maybe the pit god has already fallen into the pit. If we dig it out, it will definitely be a big deal. Everyone's reaction was very enthusiastic, and soon, many people realized that there was something wrong with it. Regardless of whether it was Kong Jingsha's couplet or Chu Yang's couplet, there were at least 3 different versions of the couplet based on the pronunciation and the position of the sentences. In other words, there were at least 3 couplets, or even more. For example, it could be done this way. Morning after morning, 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 morning after morning. Chow can be used for chow, while chong can be used for chong and chong. This change is completely different. And with so many tricks in the first line, to be able to match the second line in such a short time, this was simply shocking. Therefore, the more people found out, the more shocked they were, and the louder the exclamations became. This made Chu Yang admire him even more, and some people even suspected that he was not human, because this was definitely not something a human would do. Chu Yang naturally had his reasons for being able to do this. Firstly, he had been reborn. Secondly, he had obtained the complete inheritance of the Confucian Tao. Thirdly, he had experienced 9 reincarnations. It would be a joke if he still couldn't answer. Disregarding everything else, just what kind of concept was 9 lives of reincarnation? With such abundant capital, who else in the world could compare to him? However, even after 9 reincarnations, he still didn't know how to overcome the obstacle of becoming the Jin Emperor. Therefore, he didn't feel complacent at all when he was faced with the exclamations and astonishment, the gazes of admiration and the uneasiness of Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo. His heart was still hazy. At this moment, he was even more worried. Because of the challenge between Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo, there might be some unexpected variables. Therefore, his heart was filled with worry. As such, when Kong Jingsha was so shocked that he had stopped the battle, he impatiently said, "Kong Jingsha, are you done being shocked?" These words caused the entire crowd to turn silent. Kong Jingsha's face involuntarily turned red. "That's not right. Is this a trap? You should be showing off at this time. Something's wrong. Something must have gone wrong. Bullshit. 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 Haha." Many people laughed out loud. Kong Jingsha's face turned even redder, and he felt even more ashamed in his heart. It was as if he had finally noticed Chu Yang's contempt and ridicule towards him. He gritted his teeth and began to write couplets again, a few floors, holding up the eastern peak alone, unifying the distant mountains near the river, providing a painting, gathering the Tsong snow, scattering the white river smoke, drying the red clouds, dyeing the green clothes in the mist. Sometimes a poet praises the ancient times, sometimes a fierce warrior praises the borders. The most pitiful flower core drifts, buried in the precious mirror of spring. The loquat is lonely, leaving the green fields and fragrant graves. Towards this, all sorts of feelings welled up in one's heart. Laughing silly butterflies, always greedy to be sent to the land of drunken dreams. Trying to shout from the top, ask, 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 whose family does this half-river moon belong to? What a long couplet. Oh my God. As soon as he finished speaking, many people in the crowd exclaimed in surprise. This couplet was indeed a little too long. The word split is correct, the homophone is correct, and now he's playing this again. Hehe, let's see if the bullshit can reply so quickly this time. As soon as the crowd started to clamor, Chu Yang's voice had already sounded out, immediately suppressing all the other noises. Everyone could clearly hear such a long couplet in their ears. Chapter 2598. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, an earth-shattering roar erupted. It was unstoppable. Such a long couplet could be matched in an instant. It was simply too frightening. At this moment, Kong Jingsha could not help but tremble. His face turned even redder. The couplets that he had painstakingly prepared were not able to withstand Chu Yang for even a moment. They were all destroyed in an instant. It was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He hurriedly made another couplet. Green mountains are not painted by 1,000 autumns. Flowing water has no strings, ancient zither. The body is like a leisurely cloud, the moon's shadow is like a stream's light. The heart is like the flowing water, the sound of pine trees and bamboo, forgetting the opportunity. Once the red rain flies, 1,000 forests scatter the shade. In an instant, an astonishing scene was formed. Kong Jingsha quickly made a couplet and Chu Yang quickly matched it. The two people's mouths were constantly moving. Many people had no time to distinguish whether Chu Yang's words were correct or not. They could only listen to one couplet after another. It continuously penetrated their ears like an inexhaustible stream of water. Kong Jingsha was completely flustered. He had never met such a person who could match his couplets so quickly and continuously. It was so accurate and wonderful. He knew that he definitely did not have such ability. Therefore, he suddenly felt as if he had knocked his head against a southern wall. He felt that his head was already dripping with blood. He wanted to dampen Chu Yang's spirit. He wanted to give Chu Yang a ruthless blow in literary arts. However, he did not expect such an outcome. Not only did he not succeed, he even sent Chu Yang to the altar after this incident. Who would dare to doubt Chu Yang's talent in literary arts? One of the two talents had already been confirmed. Only one was left to prove that Chu Yang was not only a talent in literary arts and martial arts in Taijing City, he was also a talent in literary arts and martial arts in Taijing City. In the picture, the dragon does not roar and the tiger does not roar. The little study companion is laughable. Kong Jingsha was flustered. His mind was blank. The couplets that he had prepared had already been used up. He could not think of any other couplets. Therefore, he could not help but blurt out such a couplet. This pair was one of the many pairs that he had unintentionally obtained. It couldn't be said to be difficult, but it definitely wasn't easy either. There were no answers to all of them, and the further he went, the more vulgar the couplets became. This left a deep impression on him, so he remembered it very clearly. He did not hope that these couplets could save him, but he hoped that by relying on these couplets, he could get through this period of time and stabilize his state of mind. In this way, he could continue to be in a stalemate with Chu Yang and continue to fight fiercely. In the painting, the dragon doesn't roar and the tiger doesn't roar. The little study companion is laughable. Chu Yang suddenly heard this familiar sentence. Even though he was currently very worried, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. He was extremely surprised in his heart. It actually worked. A long time ago, he had asked Shangguan Lan to find a way to give these couplets to his love rival, Kong Jingsha. Then, he would ruthlessly set Kong Jingsha up. At that time, because he was angry, and because there was a love rival like Kong Jingsha, he felt a lot of pressure. Thus, he messed around to vent his pressure. Thus, even though he knew that he was messing around, he still let Shangguan Lan do it. He really did not expect that such a thing would actually work. If it were in the past, he would probably laugh until he went crazy. However, at this moment, he only laughed, and then all the joy disappeared. Even if he wanted to laugh again, he could not laugh. Especially when he recalled all the wonderful things that he had with Shangguan Lan, it was even more so. I hope that it will work this time, because this is a rare cooperation between Lan Lan and me. It's a rare joint effort. Chapter 2599. Chu Yang couldn't help but smile when he thought of Shangguan Lan's smile. Many people were surprised because there seemed to be something wrong with that smile. It was obviously weird. Chu Yang immediately noticed everyone's surprised eyes. His heart skipped a beat. I can't let the Jin Emperor know about such a little secret between me and Lan Lan. Otherwise, he will go crazy with jealousy. If the Jin Emperor went crazy with jealousy, then what he was going to do would be even crazier. At this moment, although Chu Yang knew that he was overthinking and was a little sensitive, he still felt sullen. He and Shangguan Lan were in love, but he still had to care about the feelings of other men. Naturally, such a feeling was definitely one of the worst feelings in his life, but he had to endure it. Because of the sullen feeling in his heart, he ignored Kong Jingsha's couplet and directly said to the crowd, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen Chu Yang's smile? Haven't you seen Chu Yang's smile full of mystery?" It was a pity that no one knew the so-called Mona Lisa's smile, otherwise Chu Yang would definitely be scolded to death. Everyone was speechless at Chu Yang's sudden outburst. This guy was simply crazy. Haha. Some people suddenly burst into laughter. They laughed so hard that their stomachs seemed to hurt. God of fraud, you are out of your mind. You can't hold it in and go crazy. All the previous pretenses are all in vain. Haha, the god of fraud finally can't pretend anymore. It's really good news. It's really satisfying. The god of fraud can't pretend anymore. This is simply a fantastic story. Hurry up and record it. Maybe it will go down in history in the future. Yes, 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 we must firmly remember such a scene. It will definitely be of great value in the future. It can't be bought with money. Because of these people, more people burst into laughter. Chu Yang couldn't help but touch his nose. He smiled slightly and said in his heart, I accidentally led a wave of shamelessness and got a lot of people's love. I can be said to be a real talent. Bullshit. If you want to act, you have to go all out. He said disdainfully, How can I break my cultivation? Don't you think I'm the world's most arrogant, most handsome, most talented book companion? In the painting, the dragon did not roar, the tiger did not roar, and the little study companion was laughable. At this moment, many people seemed to understand what was going on after hearing Chu Yang's words. It was obvious that Kong Jingsha had disdainfully referred to Chu Yang as a study companion, and Chu Yang was a little displeased. Hehe, interesting. According to my conclusion and research on how to scam a god, this is clearly the rhythm of a personal attack. In other words, it's already on the verge of scolding. You can say that. Later on, when we match the couplet, it might very well turn into a war of word. Isn't it obvious that the god of deception is telling us that we can't blame him later? The way to scam a god has always been like this. You've taken advantage of him, but you still want to pretend to be innocent. Not to mention when he's in the right. Needless to say, he'll definitely bully you to death. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, Kong Jingsha was a little confused. According to what the crowd said, he seemed to have really despised and belittled Chu Yang. After all, the word study companion had already expressed everything incisively and vividly. Oh no, I've belittled him so much. If I lose to him later, I'll really have no face left. I'll be embarrassed to death. He realized that things were bad, but there was no other way. Because things had already come to this. Chapter 2600. Checkmate me. Guard against him? What's the meaning of this? You want me to guard against being humiliated by him? How arrogant. Do you really think you've won? When Kong Jingsha heard such a couplet, he was instantly enraged. He said angrily, orioles and swallows, green and red, harmonious everywhere. Chu Yang could not help but smile in his heart. What a familiar phrase, what a familiar couplet. He also quickly said, rain rain wind wind wind, flower flower leaf leaf leaf, year after year, day after day, my superior prestige, show me the courage of a tiger. Because of his pride and self-esteem, Kong Jingsha was angry. He coordinated with his anger and said such a sentence. It was extremely imposing and also extremely emotional. In an instant, everyone felt that the battle between the two of them was becoming more and more intense. When Chu Yang heard this sentence, he could not help but feel a trace of anger in his heart. Because my superior prestige, show me the courage of a tiger, this sentence was indeed awe-inspiring and arrogant. It was indeed able to provoke people's nerves. He immediately said, you're vulgar and despicable, show me half of your penis. Immediately, Kong Jingsha felt as if he had been hit by a stick. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted. This bastard is actually so vulgar and unrestrained. What kind of bullshit can he say? What kind of shit can he spit out? However, many people at the side had already burst into laughter when they heard Chu Yang's vulgar sentence. It's here, it's finally here. The legendary personal attack has finally arrived in person. Ha ha, as expected of the god of cheating. If you dare to be arrogant, I dare to be arrogant by 3 times. If you want to anger me half to death, I'll definitely anger you to death. No, it should be like this. You're really bold, you actually dare to be vulgar in front of me. Don't you know that I'm the ancestor of vulgarity? Are you blind? It wasn't easy for me to be civilized, but you immediately beat me back to my original state. You really deserve to die 1,000 times for your sins. At least, in the eyes of the crowd, Chu Yang was definitely so. Therefore, many people had already gone crazy with laughter. The scene was lively, and the whole place was filled with laughter. As Qin Guo listened to all these words and felt everything, he started to worry about Kong Jingsha for no reason. Based on everyone's reaction, Kong Jingsha had obviously fallen into Chu Yang's trap. No, that's not accurate. Instead, I should say that vulgarity seems to be Chu Yang's specialty. No one can beat him. As for Huangfu Xian, Shangguan Xiao, Xie Xiubua, and the rest of the 6 great young masters of Taijing City, they suddenly realized that their understanding of Chu Yang was far less than that of the onlookers. Of course, the loud laughter of the crowd caused Kong Jingsha to be even more agitated. That was because every single one of them was laughing, every single one of them was saying that Chu Yang had already won, and that he was definitely going to lose. He didn't believe in this evil, and he couldn't get rid of those couplets that he had obtained. Because those couplets were vulgar enough, but they were also good enough to go further. For example, this sentence, "Plant trees in your house." He became even angrier, and his voice grew louder. Chu Yang was even more disdainful. He glanced at Kong Jingsha, and said word by word with extreme disdain, "Fish in your bathtub." Vulgarity indeed had its uses. At least in terms of anger, it had an obvious effect. With a whoosh, Kong Jingsha's anger rushed to his head, and blood rushed to his face. He gritted his teeth and retorted word by word, "Fish in my stomach." Chapter 2601. What the hell? He didn't understand. Using couplets to mock, ridicule and scold each other, but he really didn't understand. What was there to be proud of? What was there to mock? You scold me, I scold me. Victory hasn't been decided yet. What's there to be proud of? What's there to mock? Before he could understand what was going on, he heard Chu Yang's indifferent reply, "Your mother will personally cook. How dare you scold my mother?" He was furious and immediately scolded back. Suddenly, he realized that he had used up all the couplets he had received earlier. Instantly, his entire body shook. Following that, an extremely clear scene appeared in his mind, couplets pierced through his intestines, causing him to vomit 3 liters of blood. The reason why Kong Jingsha had such a deep impression of these couplets was not only because they were extremely vulgar, but also because these couplets were accompanied by pictures. In the pictures, there were 2 people competing with each other, and the person who came up with the first couplet was pierced through his intestines, causing him to vomit 3 liters of blood. When he first saw this, he dismissed it with a laugh. Couplets were just for fun. Even if he didn't have a temper after being insulted, he wouldn't be pierced through his intestines, nor would he vomit 3 liters of blood. But now, it didn't seem to be an exaggeration, because he finally realized something. Oh no, I've been tricked. I've completely fallen for this despicable trick. Kong Jingsha's intuition told him that something was amiss. He realized that he might have been played for a fool, and the consequences were simply unimaginable. If news of him being played for a fool like this were to spread, he would definitely become a laughingstock. He would be laughed at until he died. How do you feel? At this moment, Chu Yang suddenly said to him, "My couplets aren't bad, right? And the pictures I drew aren't bad either, right? Piercing through your intestines, vomiting 3 liters of blood isn't too much, right? But why haven't you pierced your intestines and vomited 3 liters of blood until now? Could it be that your intestines are thicker, or your blood is thicker, or your skin is thicker?" Buzz buzz buzz. Those couplets are indeed his. I've really been tricked. Kong Jingsha no longer had any doubts in his heart. His mind buzzed and he immediately felt that the world was spinning. Between shame and anger, his internal organs were burning. He even faintly felt that his throat was itching, as if he was about to vomit something. This can't be. You can't do this even if you kill me. If this continues, I, Kong Jingsha, will no longer be able to live. With a plop, Kong Jingsha lost control of his body as he clenched his teeth. He staggered and fell to the ground in front of everyone. Haha, the god of deceit is indeed invincible. Kong Jingsha is about to faint from anger. He didn't just faint from anger. I think he has suffered internal injuries. However, the god of deceit is still not strong enough. Where is the 3 liters of blood that pierced through his intestines? When Kong Jingsha heard this, his vision darkened. He thought to himself, could it be that this is also part of that despicable person's plan? He was so angry that he almost vomited blood and fainted. At this moment, his current appearance could be said to be awkward, awkward, awkward to the extreme. It was as if he couldn't wait to find a hole in the ground and hide in it. Tragic, tragic, tragic to the extreme. Even Qin Guo, who was watching from the side, could not help but feel sympathy for him. Don't be in such a hurry to faint. Also, don't be in such a hurry to vomit blood. The victor has not been decided yet. Chu Yang stood in front of Kong Jingsha and looked down. However, this level is still not enough. It has not reached the level of piercing through his intestines and vomiting 3 liters of blood. As he spoke, he pointed to the crowd and said, Did you hear that? Everyone is already complaining that I didn't let you pierce through his intestines and vomit 3 liters of blood. Although this is my fault, I ask for your cooperation. Kong Jingshe was extremely humiliated. He really wanted to die together with Chu Yang. However, he knew very well that he had already lost. He had completely lost. If this continued, he would lose even more miserably. He would be even more embarrassed and humiliated. When that time came, the humiliation would be even greater. It would even exceed his imagination. Chapter 2602. You were indeed a fraud god in the past. Chu Yang stared blankly for a moment. When he noticed everyone's reaction, he immediately realized Kong Jingshe's brilliance. With just this one sentence, Kong Jingshe easily dispelled his awkwardness and distress, and completely rescued him from this predicament. It had to be said that the nickname of Chu Yang, the fraud god, gave Kong Jingshe a lot of convenience. Of course, Kong Jingshe was really deceived by Chu Yang. Haha. The crowd at the side had already burst into laughter. You are indeed Kong Jingshe. Chu Yang could only praise Kong Jingshe. The reason was very simple. Kong Jingshe dared to admit defeat and mock himself. Among his past enemies, there were very few people who dared to do so. However, logically speaking, Kong Jingshe should be even more arrogant than those people. Should I be thanking you for your compliment? Chu Yang thought highly of him. Kong Jingshe definitely didn't want to thank him. I just want to say that it's not bad to have a love rival like you. Chu Yang was speaking the truth. The existence of Kong Jingshe, Qin Guo, and the others might really be able to change things. Of course, such a sentence made Kong Jingshe very surprised. He had even keenly sensed something from Chu Yang's tone. I admit defeat. Kong Jingshe couldn't understand. He was too lazy to think about it. He directly admitted defeat. Next, it should be his turn to watch a good show from the side. Can I admit defeat? Chu Yang couldn't help but ask in his heart. He really wanted to admit defeat. However, he couldn't do so even if he wanted to. At this moment, Kong Jingshe and Qin Guo's positions swapped. Qin Guo was already standing in front of him. Tell me, what do you want to play? Chu Yang became a little irritated as he thought about the difficult matter in his heart. He was even more annoyed with Qin Guo. Both civil and martial, one civil and one martial. Qin Guo's voice was even more magnetic than Kong Jingshe's. Chu Yang was startled when he heard this voice. He was very sure that many women would fall in love with this voice and fall in love with this man. If there was a saying that one could recognize a beauty by their voice, then this saying was definitely applicable to Qin Guo, a beauty like him. Chu Yang looked at Qin Guo's handsome face. He couldn't find a single flaw. He couldn't help but admit that Qin Guo could be said to be doted on by the heavens. He was excessively beautiful. However, in terms of temperament, Qin Guo was somewhat inferior to Kong Jingshe. If Kong Jingshe is a scholar, then you are a martial artist, right? What did Qin Guo want to challenge? Chu Yang didn't need to ask. He already knew. Whether it was Qin Guo or Kong Jingshe, they would definitely not allow Chu Yang to have such a good reputation. With such a good reputation, Duke Ju and the others would have too few reasons to object, and it would be too easy for Chu Yang to obtain Shangguanlan. Please, Chu Yang directly invited Qin Guo. Instantly, the surrounding crowd was thrown into chaos and scattered in all directions. Are the two of them going to fight here? If they fight here, this place will definitely be turned into ruins. Not only this place will be turned into ruins, the two of them might go berserk and erupt with their full strength. Taijing City might be turned into a mess. Chu Yang didn't have any reaction. It was as if the destruction of Taijing City had nothing to do with him. Qin Guo was the same. He didn't seem to care at all about the destruction caused by the fight between him and Chu Yang. The two of them just stood there, facing each other without moving an inch. Chapter 2603. Who is to blame and whose reputation is to be tarnished? Those who praise me should try it out. This is the reason why the third generation walked the path of righteousness. As this voice rang out from Qin Guo's body, a huge shadow appeared behind him. Then, the sound of reading rang out. It was the process of a child growing up into an adult, cultivating his body and mind, and managing the country and bringing peace to the world. At the same time, a faint smell of ink filled the whole place. Rumble. Qin Guo's body became hazy, and a loud rumbling sound came from inside, as if a dam was discharging water. It was as if a certain wheel of history was turning again and rolling forward. Immediately, a holy, peaceful, and righteous qi surged out from the deepest part of his body. Then, two tentacle-like rays of light floated out of his pupils, pure and holy. This was the state of Confucianism. Qin Guo entered the state of Confucianism in an instant, ready to fight with Chu Yang. Chu Yang's response was also very simple. He also entered the state of Confucianism, but his movements were much smaller. He entered the state of Confucianism with a slight movement. Chu Yang had already reached perfection in the state of Confucianism. He had returned to simplicity and reached a state where he could do whatever he wanted. Qin Guo could not compare with him at all. In the 9 reincarnations, how could he miss out on the state of Confucianism in order to defeat the Jin Emperor? Moreover, besides the state of Confucianism, he had not only mastered all the other states, but also reached the point where he could do whatever he wanted. Without comparison, it was impossible to tell who was better. With just this, Qin Guo knew that he had lost in this aspect. However, he reached out his hand and grabbed the peaceful and righteous qi that was surging within his body. He said, "This is Confucian qi, not awe-inspiring righteous qi." The special statement was very simple. Chu Yang is not the only one who can enter the state of Confucianism. I, Qin Guo, can also enter the state of Confucianism, and I am even stronger than you. You've only comprehended a single aspect of the way of Confucianism. So, you've formed the awe-inspiring energy. But, I, Qin Guo, have comprehended the entire way of Confucianism. And, I've cultivated the way of Confucianism. Confucianism is more comprehensive and stronger than righteousness. Chu Yang understood what he meant, but was too lazy to argue with him. You can make your move now. Do I need to make a move? Qin Guo sneered. You've already lost. Could it be that you don't even know that you've already lost? Hee hee. Chu Yang couldn't help but chuckle. When one entered the state of Confucianism or the state of immortals, they could indeed see a lot of things clearly. They could anticipate the details of the opponent's battle beforehand and know the outcome of the battle before the battle even started. It was already a victory or defeat. However, this was only possible when one was stronger than the other. If both parties were of similar strength, there would be a great variable in the prediction, just like the battle between Chu Yang and Rui Zi. If his strength was not as good as his opponent's, then the so-called prediction would only be a joke. The principle behind this was very simple. When one obtained the support of an era that had once existed, one would stand at an extremely high position and naturally be able to see through many things. For example, in the era of Confucianism, after entering the state of Confucianism, the world would be like a chessboard in one's eyes, and people like Qin Guo would be the chess player. From this, Qin Guo could naturally see a lot. But as mentioned before, this was based on Chu Yang's way of chess being far inferior to Qin Guo's. But how could Chu Yang's way of chess be weaker than Qin Guo's? I am to others, who is to blame and whose is to be praised? If one praises someone, one should try it out. This is the reason why the 3rd generation of Confucianism went straight. Chapter 2604. Swoosh. Qin Guo's expression changed drastically. The words that came out of his body were more or less straightforward. This was one of the beliefs that Qin Sheng believed in the early days. But because of this, there was once an expert who kindly reminded Qin Sheng, saying that Qin Sheng saw things too deeply and spoke too sharply. If he hurt some people of status, he would bring great danger to himself. When Qin Sheng heard this, he further developed the idea of being kind to others. In the end, he established a moral theory with benevolence as the core. After that, there were even sayings like "do not do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and a gentleman will fulfill the wishes of others, not the vices of others." This was the Confucianism of the heavenly soul world. But to Chu Yang, Qin Sheng was actually Kong Sheng, and the expert was actually Laozi. Confucius once asked Laozi for advice. What Chu Yang knew and the level of detail he knew far exceeded Qin Guo's imagination. Qin Guo was completely stunned. Did you expect that I would use such a sentence to refute you? Chu Yang saw Qin Guo's shocked expression and couldn't help but sneer. He warned, "You better not think too highly of yourself in front of me." Swords were drawn. What Chu Yang and Qin Guo said just now was nothing to ordinary people. However, to Kong Jingshe, Rui Zi, and the other young masters of the grand capital city, every word they heard made them shudder with fear and trepidation. Because such a confrontation seemed harmless, but it was actually the most dangerous. Especially Chu Yang, he was simply going to dig up the ancestral grave of Qin Guo's Confucianism. You are saying that you are not weaker than me in terms of Confucianism? Qin Guo was only stunned for a short while before he became completely indifferent. Chu Yang's words didn't affect him much. From this, it could be seen that Qin Guo was extremely confident in Confucianism. And he had ample reason to be so. The founder of Confucianism in the heavenly soul world was his ancestor. Not weaker than you. Chu Yang glanced at Qin Guo and for some reason, his anger surged. Where do you get that confidence from? In his previous life, there was also Confucianism. Moreover, his knowledge of Confucianism in his previous life was not something Qin Guo and the others could compare with. He was the first to comprehend the state of Confucianism. He was also the first to obtain the inheritance of the Confucian era. He was also the only one who had obtained the Great Harmony Sutra. Yet, Qin Guo dared to be so presumptuous in front of him. You want to talk about Confucianism again, right? Qin Guo was about to retort when he heard this, but before he could reply, Chu Yang had already spoken first. Chu Yang's voice was even colder. Don't keep repeating in front of me that your Confucian qi is better than my noble qi. Before that, you'd better understand what it means to get rid of the dross and extract the essence. Are you going to say that this is a joke again? How can there be any dross in the Confucian path? Without the dregs, how could the era of Confucianism be destroyed? Are you going to say that Confucianism is not wrong, but that it has not been properly led? Chu Yang said a bunch of things, and then said sarcastically, "This is called foresight, do you understand? What you want to do, I have already foreseen in advance." After a pause, he pointed at Qin Guo and said coldly, "You are just a dross in front of me." Swish. Qin Guo's face suddenly turned red, and then he flew into a rage. "Bastard, do you really think that without you, no one can inherit the Confucianism, and no one can create the civilization of the Confucianism and the prosperity of the Confucianism again?" Chapter 2605. You're saying that I touched the epoch of Confucianism, comprehended the righteous energy, and obtained the inheritance of the epoch. I stole your fortune, right? Isn't that the case? Chu Yang was even angrier. He couldn't help but sneer. Putting everything else aside, you're saying that Confucianism belongs to your Qin clan. What a bold claim. Qin Guo naturally knew that the path of Confucianism was developed through the joint efforts of many people, but so what? In his opinion, Confucianism belonged to his Qin clan. Therefore, he said righteously, am I wrong? If my Qin clan's ancestor didn't create Confucianism, there wouldn't be Confucianism, and there wouldn't be an epoch of Confucianism. Confucianism was created by Qin Sheng of the Qin clan. Chu Yang was the first to disagree. The Confucianism in his heart was never the Confucianism of the heavenly soul world, but the Confucianism of his previous life. Even if it wasn't for this, he would never agree with such a view. He directly dug up Qin Guo's ancestral grave and laughed angrily. Who told you that Confucianism was created by your clan's ancestor? Do you have proof? Is there enough proof? Moreover, as far as I know, the ancestor of Confucianism might not be your Qin clan's ancestor. The world still has doubts about this. Chu Yang knew very well about the heavenly soul world's path of Confucianism. The founder of the path of Confucianism in the heavenly soul world was indeed Qin Sheng, but Chu Yang couldn't bear to see Qin Guo take the path of Confucianism for himself. What a joke! Joke my ass! Qin Guo retorted, but Chu Yang cut him off. His voice grew colder and colder. In this world, there is only one founder of Confucianism, and that is Confucius. Your clan's ancestor was just a disciple of Confucius. The reason why he was thought to be the founder of Confucianism was because the disciples of Confucianism wanted to protect Confucius. They asked your clan's ancestor to pretend to be Confucius. That's why there is such a misunderstanding. Do you really think you're something? Boom. These things that Chu Yang had tossed out had fiercely shocked everyone. The ancestor of Confucianism was not Qin Sheng, but Kong Sheng. It was such an unfamiliar name. Moreover, Chu Yang also gave a very logical reason, so for a moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Moreover, because Chu Yang was the first inheritor of the Confucian epoch, even if he was making things up, his words still carried great weight. It could be said that Chu Yang's words today would definitely cause a great commotion. Bastard, how dare you spout such nonsense? Qin Guo's face and ears were red, his neck was thick, his 7 apertures were almost smoking. He was so angry that he was like a raging fire. What's the point of yelling over there? Chu Yang was already in a bad mood. Now that he had met someone like Qin Guo, he was even angrier. He glanced at Qin Guo from the corner of his eyes and said, "Take out the battlefield you've prepared and start fighting. I don't have time to waste with you." "As you wish." Qin Guo gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. He took out a white pearl and threw it into the sky. Whoosh. As soon as the white pearl entered the sky, it immediately expanded infinitely. In an instant, it seemed to be as big as a star. There were suns, moons, stars, mountains, rivers, lakes, flowers, birds, insects, fish, and so on. This was a dimensional world, and an extremely solid one at that. It was completely transparent, so when people looked up from below, they could immediately see the scene inside clearly. Qin Guo had naturally prepared such a dimensional world for his battle with Chu Yang. Such extravagance immediately caused the densely packed crowd to turn into a wave. The cries of surprise were like the sound of waves, rising and falling one after another. Whoosh. Chapter 2606. At that moment, the discussion became even more intense. Who do you think will win, Kung Shen or Qin Guo? Needless to say, Kung Shen can predict all of Qin Guo's actions in the state of Confucianism. Obviously, Kung Shen is much stronger than Qin Guo, so Kung Shen is sure to win. That's hard to say. After all, that dimensional world belongs to Qin Guo. There might be something fishy in it. So what if there is something fishy? Who can cheat Kung Shen? So, I'm not worried about that. On the contrary, Qin Guo seems to be a little too weak, so I feel that something is wrong. Generally speaking, everyone was optimistic about Chu Yang. In fact, many people had an inexplicable confidence in Chu Yang. But, this battle hadn't started yet. And, the result hadn't come out yet. So, it was still hard to say. At this time, Chu Yang and Qin Guo had completely entered the dimensional world and appeared in a vast desert. The desert was so vast that it was unknown how many tens of thousands of miles long it was. The scorching sun hung high in the sky, and when the sunlight shone down, it was like falling on pieces of gold, giving off a layer of golden light. It was very beautiful. The entire desert looked like a yellow palace. Whoosh whoosh. In the golden desert, the wind kept whistling. Soon, there was a sky full of yellow sand sweeping over. The people below not only saw everything in the dimensional world clearly, but also heard it very clearly. Bastard, die. As soon as they entered the dimensional world, before people could carefully feel everything, Qin Guo seemed to hate Chu Yang very much and immediately attack. He moved with anger and disappeared in an instant. But he seemed to be everywhere, like the wind in the desert. Chu Yang landed on the desert. His feet stepped on the sand, and he immediately felt a great heat. He couldn't help but squint his eyes. But just when he squinted his eyes slightly, Qin Guo, who had disappeared into thin air, immediately reappeared. Qin Guo appeared in front of Chu Yang, and was definitely not behind him. His movements were also very simple. He directly smashed out with his fist. Instantly, the 6 scriptures of poetry, book, etiquette, music, changes, and spring and autumn appeared and revolved around his fist like 6 planets, as well as the 6 paths of reincarnation. When the fist struck out, the 6 meridians appeared. It was as if the 6 Tao had manifested. It was majestic and grand, and it was extremely imposing. A wave of boundless mighty force immediately rushed out, causing people's hearts to tremble and their souls to tremble. During this process, two more tentacle-like rays of light floated out from Qinguo's eyes. Although they were the same as the previous two rays of light, they were thicker and closer to the center. This punch was really too shocking. Before it fell, before it even reached Chu Yang, it had already rolled up yellow sand that filled the sky. Heaven and earth immediately turned yellow. Yellow sand filled the sky, covering the sun and sky. Nothing could be seen in the darkness, and it did not calm down for a long time. People were very curious, but they could only make guesses based on what they had seen before. What's the result? Did Kengshen win, or did Qinguo win? Kengshen's cultivation is only at the Nirvana realm. I'm afraid it's a little difficult. Aren't you a little stupid to say this? Let's not talk about Kengshen's true strength first. Now that the heavenly Tao has undergone a great change, the sage, earthly sovereign, and great emperor realms will be redefined in the future. Who will break through at this time? That's why Kengshen and the other geniuses studied the eras. If they obtained the inheritance of a certain era, their strength would definitely not be inferior to the great emperor. Chapter 2607. Just now, I saw that Qinguo seemed to have used the inheritance of other eras in addition to the Confucian era. That shouldn't be the inheritance of other eras. It should be the second state of the Confucian state, the son of an era. The Confucian state could be divided into 4 levels according to the depth of understanding and mastery of the Confucian era: era inheritor, era son, era lord, and era transcendent. The era inheritor was actually very simple. The Confucian era naturally didn't just have an inheritor who could obtain the inheritance after obtaining the initial recognition. The era son was like the crown prince, while the Confucian era was the emperor. All the inheritors were the princes. The emperor of the Confucian era was further selected from the princes to inherit the emperor's throne. This was the era son. This stage was actually the most difficult one. However, after becoming the crown prince, it was not certain that one would become the emperor. One would still have to be challenged by many princes. However, if one truly became the emperor, that would be the third stage, becoming the epoch master. The fourth stage was the era transcendence. As the name implied, it meant that one had transcended a certain era's civilization. For example, the Confucian era was the Confucian immortal. Many people knew about this, especially those at the level of the 6 great young masters of Taijing City. They were already very clear about this. Therefore, when someone raised such a point of view, many people couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that Qinguo has been pretending to be weak just now in order to deceive the pit deity? It's all for this attack. If that's really the case, the pit deity is probably doomed this time. People had many guesses, but they were only guesses in the end. They could only wait and see what the truth was. What's the point of playing this game? Do you really think I don't know? Don't waste time. Just use the 4th gear. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. In the dimensional world, the sky full of yellow sand didn't fall, but Chu Yang's disdainful voice was heard. What was more shocking was that not only did he not fall into Qinguo's trap, but he also made Qinguo use the 4th gear of the Confucian state. Qinguo didn't give any response. Then, everyone saw the blazing light of the great sun burning all the yellow sand in the dimensional world. Instantly, everything was clear and there was nothing blocking their vision. Immediately after that, the crowd saw that Qinguo had already leaped into the air and was throwing a punch at Chu Yang. His fist was the small sun that people had just seen. The fist was crystal clear, and there seemed to be a dimensional world in it. To be exact, it was the Confucian era. Everything about the Confucian way was shown in the fist. At this level, he was at least at the 3rd grade of the Confucian state, the Epoch Master. Qinguo seemed to have transformed into the Epoch Lord of Confucianism, controlling the entire epoch of Confucianism to crush Chu Yang. This was already incomparably shocking, but it was not over yet. When the fist was about to hit Chu Yang, an ethereal figure flew out of the fist that represented the entire epoch. Like a flying immortal, it instantly left the entire epoch and looked down on the entire Confucian epoch from outside the world. Heavenly Fairy. The fourth grade of the Confucian state, Confucian immortal. Everyone looked at such a fist. After being shocked, they couldn't help but feel a little confused. In such a short time, Qin Guo had directly reached the fourth grade of the Confucian state and used the Confucian immortal form to fight to the death with Chu Yang. Everyone was surprised, but they found that Chu Yang was not surprised at all. In the face of Qin Guo's fist, there was only contempt on his face. It was as if he didn't care about Qin Guo and the fourth grade of the Confucian state at all. What is he relying on? Chapter 2608. The fourth level of the state of Confucianism, Qin Guo's fist was like the sun, like the era of Confucianism, with the image of flying immortals. The yellow sand all over the sky was wiped out like smoke, as if it was destroying the world. Its momentum was hard to describe with words. Such a punch seemed to make people feel that the end of the world was coming, or that the destruction of the era of Confucianism was once again played out at this moment. Chu Yang's face was calm, and he calmly punched out. Suddenly, a long man about 2 meters tall, 9 feet 6 inches long appeared. There was a depression in the middle of his head, like a chiu, high in all directions and low in the middle. This long man was Confucius, at least the Confucius in the historical records. In the saying of the origin of Confucius's name Chiu, there was a saying, Wei Yang Wu. Top Yin Ding. Wei Ding Yang Wu Yi, so Confucius's head was like a reverse universe. Reverse universe, like the opposite of the house, low in all directions and high in all directions. This meant that there was a depression in the middle of Confucius's head. I am also cheap, so I can do many despicable things. The difficult life of Confucius when he was young was immediately revealed. Jun Jun, Chen Chen, father, son. When Confucius was in the state of Qi, he talked about music with Grand Preceptor Qi, heard the beauty of Shao music, and did not know the taste of meat for 3 months. Then, Duke Jing of Qi asked Confucius about politics, and Confucius's deeds in the state of Qi were all revealed. He did not pick up lost things on the road, and did not close his door at night. Then, what appeared was Confucius's governance of the state of Lu, and then he was forced to leave the state of Lu, and took a group of disciples to travel around the various countries, passing through Wei, Cao, Song, Zheng, Chen, Cai, Yi, Chu, and so on. During this time, in Quang, Song, Pu, and other places, Confucius and his group were trapped many times. The danger of the Song dynasty, the ferocious administration of the country, the imprisonment of the Chen Cai dynasty, and many other similar events also appeared. The life of Confucius was displayed one by one in Chu Yang's fist. It was as if he had reenacted the life of Confucius. I was 15 years old and determined to learn, 30 years old and not doubting, 50 years old and knowing the destiny, 60 years old and obedient, 70 years old and following my heart's desire, not exceeding the rules. This was the last vision, and also the conclusion of Confucius's life. And with this vision, with the end of Confucius's life, Chu Yang's punch just happened to meet Qin Guo's punch. In an instant, something completely unexpected happened. The infinite radiance on Qin Guo's fist disappeared. The world disappeared, the Confucian epoch disappeared, the otherworldly flying immortal disappeared. All of the grand images, all of the frightening auras, all of the boundless power disappeared as if they had never existed. In other words, everything was unreal and illusory, just like a bubble. With a light touch, everything would vanish, and there would be nothing left. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it Sea City's Chen Lu. After all, Qin Guo's punch had shaken everyone to their core. As for Chu Yang, in the eyes of the crowd, it was as if he had just casually extended his fist and touched the bubble. It was as if he had done it effortlessly. It could be said that as soon as they came into contact, everything ended. There was no world-shaking battle, nor was there any huge explosion or overturning of the world. There was nothing at all, making everything seem so unreal, like a dream, like a joke. However, at this time, Chu Yang had already come out of the dimensional world, and he did not even look at Qin Guo. However, at this moment, no one had reacted. Just like that, their eyes followed Chu Yang's movements, and they just watched Chu Yang leave in a daze without making a sound. Wait. Qin Guo's voice, Qin Guo's trembling and chaotic voice. Hearing his voice, it seemed that everyone could see that at this moment, his mind was blank, as if it had been stirred into a mass of paste. Chapter 26:10. How did you do it? Chu Yang didn't stop when he heard such a voice. I didn't do anything. I just burst your dream. Can you be more specific? I beg you. Qin Guo was such a person, yet he actually said such a thing. Although Chu Yang was surprised, he didn't stop his footsteps. A plop sound came from behind Chu Yang. Qin Guo flew out of the dimensional world and directly knelt down in front of Chu Yang. I beg you to give me a few pointers. Thud. Chu Yang finally had to stop. Do you know what it means to build a castle in the air? The era of Confucianism once existed, and there were also Confucian immortals. Therefore, logically speaking, it shouldn't be a problem to raise the state of Confucianism to the 4th level. However, the era of Confucianism has been destroyed, and everything has become illusory. But I can still get the support of the era of Confucianism. For example, the state of Confucianism. Didn't you also feel it? Is it also illusory? Qin Guo really didn't understand. When Chu Yang paused, he suddenly rushed to ask. Although there are remnants of the era of Confucianism, what makes you think that the era of Confucianism, which is struggling at death's door, will do its best to support you? You found the reason why the era of Confucianism was destroyed, and you gave the era of Confucianism hope? Qin Guo was taken aback for a moment. He seemed to understand Chu Yang's meaning. The era of Confucianism had already been destroyed. Although it still existed, its strength was definitely not enough. Facing such an unrestrained demand like him, they would only draw a pie in the sky. They would definitely not bet all their bets on him. Therefore, he wanted to raise the state of Confucianism to the 4th level. At least, he wanted to prove that his philosophy of Confucianism could make it reach the level of Confucian immortals. Of course, his philosophy couldn't be copied from the era of Confucianism. He had to have a new idea. Only then would he have value of investment, but did he have it? He might have it in the future, but at least he didn't have it now. Chu Yang was being polite when he said that the state of Confucianism was built on the 4th level of the castle in the air. To be honest, he did not have any ideals to support all of this. The reason why it appeared was because of the symbolic support of the remaining Confucian era. Therefore, this power was very illusory. However, only Chu Yang could say that this power was illusory. Others didn't have this ability because even though this was only a symbolic support from the Confucian epoch, this power was still extremely terrifying. Therefore, in essence, Qin Guo was defeated so miserably because Chu Yang's understanding of the Confucian Tao was far from what he could compare to. This caused him to be treated as a stepchild in the Confucian Tao epoch, while Chu Yang was raised by his own mother. P2E. What a bunch of nonsense. When Qin Guo understood all of this, he could not help but curse. However, he could not help but feel admiration in his heart. This logic seemed simple, but if no one had pointed it out, it would be impossible to understand. I owe you a favor, but you better not think that I will leave because of this. As Qin Guo spoke, he suddenly stopped. Then, he realized that he was the only one who was farting. There was no one around to smell his stinky fart. While he was in a daze, the dense crowd had all moved away. At this moment, he could only see the tail of the crowd. Needless to say, Chu Yang, he couldn't even see Kong Jingsha's shadow. They must have gone to Duke Ju's residence. Whoosh! Qin Guo immediately rushed over. When he arrived, the scene was not as lively as he imagined. Instead, he felt very depressed. Chapter 26:11. At this moment, Chu Yang's face was extremely gloomy, and he was on the verge of exploding in anger. On the opposite side of Chu Yang was a middle-aged man in white clothes. He was dignified, refined, and calm. He had a handsome face and an extraordinary temperament. At first glance, one could tell that this person was of noble status and had extraordinary power. Qin Guo naturally knew this person. He was Shangguan Lan's uncle, the famous General Whitehorse, Shangguan Xiao. Hehe, things are getting interesting now. Qin Guo felt an inexplicable sense of joy. He took joy in the misfortune of others, but in the blink of an eye, his smile disappeared. What do you mean? Chu Yang's voice was very harsh, and it was not the tone of a junior talking to an elder. It was very aggressive. Don't you already understand? Shangguan Xiao looked coldly at Chu Yang and said, if you want to enter this door, you have to defeat me first. Otherwise, don't even think about it. I am not qualified to enter Duke Ju's residence, and I am not qualified to marry Shangguan Lan. Shangguan Xiao, is this what you mean? Chu Yang's expression became more and more angry, and his tone became colder and colder, but only he knew what was going on in his heart. Shangguan Xiao was the first obstacle, and when he faced Shangguan Xiao at this moment, he felt that Shangguan Xiao was very familiar. He naturally knew the reason. In the 9 reincarnations, because of his continuous attempts, this scene had appeared at least 3 times. Therefore, he was too familiar with everything. He even knew what Shangguan Xiao was going to say and what kind of subtle expressions and movements he would make. If you understand it this way, then do as you please. I understand. Chu Yang certainly understood, very well. This node was very important. If it was lost, the consequences would be unimaginable. His mind was rapidly pondering and deducing. What kind of impact would the appearance of Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo have on him? The appearance of the two of them makes what I'm about to do even more logical. In the final confirmation, Chu Yang did not find any unfavorable factors, so he immediately carried out what he had thought before. After that, he directly bit open his finger, and this immediately caused everyone to be greatly surprised, and they thought that he was about to make a move. But then, everyone saw that he used his hand as a pen, blood as ink, and the void as paper, and directly wrote in the void. When the first 2 words came out, everyone's eyes immediately widened like copper bells. Divorce. Chu Yang wanted to divorce his wife. He actually wanted to divorce Shangguan Lan directly. Unbelievable, this was too unbelievable. Therefore, no one could be sure of such a situation, so they were even more focused, staring at Chu Yang's every move. Chu Yang wrote very quickly in the void. A letter of divorce silently appeared in the void. Then, it quickly enlarged so that everyone could see it. At the same time, his voice also rang out at this time. What he said was generally about the reason for the divorce. His words were mixed with his great anger, and even accusation. This was really a divorce letter, a declaration of divorce. Chu Yang had really divorced Shangguan Lan. Swoosh. Almost at the same time, Chu Yang's voice fell, and he disappeared without a trace in an instant. Only the bloody words were branded in the air. Shangguan Xiao was stunned. Kong Jingsha was stunned. Qin Guo was also stunned. Shangguan Can, Huang Fuxian, Xie Xiubua, Wang Lingyun, the 6 great young masters of Taijing City, Rui Zi, and the others were all stunned at this moment. They never thought that Chu Yang would divorce Shangguan Lan under the watchful eyes of the public. Chu Yang, this bastard, actually divorced Shangguan Lan. Chapter 26:12. Oh my God, is this true? What's going on? The god of pits actually divorced the divine fragrance talent. It must be an illusion. That's the divine fragrance talent. Who would be willing to divorce her? If he did that, that person must be a fool, a super fool. Unbelievable. This is unbelievable. Chu Yang actually divorced the divine fragrance talent. It was unknown when, but the sound of people suddenly rose from the crowd. It was like a torrential downpour. In an instant, the sky turned dark. The whole world was raining, and the sound of rain could be heard everywhere. Soon, the heavy rain seemed to have caused a flood. The noise of the giants was like a surging torrent. I don't understand. I really don't understand. Why did the god of pits divorce the divine fragrance talent? This doesn't make sense. Why did he suddenly divorce the divine fragrance talent? That's the divine fragrance talent we're talking about. Who said he wasn't? But Chu Yang really did divorce the divine fragrance talented girl right in front of us. Could it be that the god of pits has a hole in his head? After the great shock, many people tried to find a reasonable explanation, but none of them could find a reasonable reason. Shangguan Xiao himself couldn't find a reason. Until now, he still didn't understand why Chu Yang suddenly did such a thing. Before this, Chu Yang could do almost anything for Shangguan Lan. He wasn't afraid of any enemy. But suddenly, Chu Yang gave up. To be honest, Shangguan Xiao was completely dumbfounded. He admitted that he didn't like Chu Yang a little. He did want to make things difficult for Chu Yang. But this didn't seem to be a reason for Chu Yang to give up on Shangguan Lan. As Shangguan Lan's relative, Shangguan Can was also dumbfounded. He couldn't understand at all. Chu Yang had passed through so many difficulties and obstacles. Why did he suddenly give up when he was about to succeed? His uncle Shangguan Xiao was a great emperor. Was he too strong? Bullshit. According to Chu Yang's bullshit strength, his comprehension and mastery of the Confucian Tao epoch was so astonishing that even Qin Guo was far inferior to him. If that bullshit Chu Yang fought with his uncle would most likely be beaten into a pile of shit. The great emperor's cultivation was strong, but the great heir's inheritance was even stronger. Shangguan Can was very clear about this. Then why is that? Kong Jingshe and Qin Guo had the same mentality as Shangguan Can. The two of them had never thought that Chu Yang would actually make such a shocking move. The two of them couldn't figure out the reason behind it. What's so great about Ninth Duke's residence? Is Shangguan Lan made of gold? All of a sudden, two very hot-tempered voices rang out, immediately attracting the gazes of Shangguan Xiao, Shangguan Can, Kong Jingshe, Qin Guo, and the rest of the people. With a swoosh, countless gazes converged on the speaker. The speaker couldn't help but shudder uncontrollably. At this moment, he seemed to finally understand what it was like to be the center of attention. It didn't seem to be an easy thing. Normally, the god of pits would be able to deal with it so calmly. He even did all kinds of things, and all kinds of nonsense. He was really a super bluff. Everyone. He immediately put on a stiff smile and imitated Chu Yang. He cupped his fist and said to everyone, please don't misunderstand. This scum was just boldly guessing what Chu Hang was thinking. I couldn't help but blurt it out, causing everyone to misunderstand. I'm very afraid. Chapter 26:13. What's there to be afraid of? Let me tell you, based on what you've just said, if you don't give a reasonable explanation, you'll be beaten to death in a while. You'll have to end your fear immediately. That's right. Is Shangguan Lan made of gold? How dare you say something like that? You won't even know how you died later. I think you'll at least beg for death. You're on your own now. The voices drowned out the man, and he was almost scared out of his wits. Cold sweat soaked his entire body. His lips trembled as he said, everyone, I'm just guessing. What is the god of pits thinking? Tell us. That's right. Tell us. The noise was so loud that it was like a flood. It came from all directions, and the spittle was like splashing waves. When the man saw this, he immediately knew that he was cornered. He simply threw caution to the wind. Everyone, since you want to hear it, I'll tell you. After a pause, he imitated someone's tone and said, everyone, think about it. Where did the god of pits come from? The eastern wilderness. That's right. It's the eastern wilderness. He continued, between the eastern wilderness and Zhengzhou, is there the east continent? The east continent and the eastern wilderness are worlds apart, and Zhengzhou and the east continent are worlds apart. Therefore, you can roughly imagine, if you came from the eastern wilderness and went straight to Zhengzhou, how many difficulties and obstacles would you encounter? How much sadness would you encounter? Whoosh! As soon as this was said, the whole place fell silent. Many people then thought about it and immediately made a lot of connections in their minds. The eastern wilderness was too weak. From the eastern wilderness to the east continent, and then to Zhengzhou, there was a huge gap between two worlds. The things that one had to face in between could be roughly imagined. Of course, Chu Yang was a genius, so things would be much easier. However, many people understood and felt from their own perspective, because they felt that this was simply too difficult. There was a huge gap between Taijing City and Jinju. Although they were from Taijing City, it was difficult for them to establish themselves in Jinju. Let's not talk about this for now. That person continued, in the Sage Monarch Academy, he broke through the 18 stages of the Path of Strange Gates and killed a saint. In a short time, he comprehended the state of Confucianism and the state of immortality. Furthermore, The 5 experts of the Sage Monarch Academy fought to teach him so many things. How shocking, he should be qualified, right? If that's not enough, that Kung Shen won first place in both the written and martial examinations. Then he should be qualified, right? Furthermore, even if this doesn't count, on the way here, the god of traps defeated Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo. This time, he should be qualified, right? These 3 questions shocked many people. The Divine Fragrance Girl was amazing, but a person like Chu Yang who had such an amazing performance was not qualified. Was he not worthy of the Divine Fragrance Girl? Even if he was not worthy of marrying the Divine Fragrance Girl, he should be qualified to enter Duke Ju's residence, right? However, he had even entered Duke Ju's residence. What did this mean? How could he not be angry? How could he not go berserk? Shangguan Xiao had gone too far. Duke Ju's residence had gone too far. Chu Yang could not bear it anymore. Naturally, he did not need to endure anymore. Therefore, he did not need to endure anymore. Therefore, he completely exploded. Chapter 26:15. In this, the key was still the person. If it was someone else, he might not be like this, but Chu Yang was different. How could such an arrogant and unruly person bear the humiliation of Duke Ju's mansion again and again? The god of fraud is indeed the god of fraud. So what if she is the divine fragrance talented lady? There are plenty of fish in the sea. There is only one divine fragrance talented lady in this world. Is there only one divine fragrance talented lady? A real man does not have to worry about not having a wife. The god of fraud is indeed a man with ambition. This time, I really admire him from the bottom of my heart. I have to admire him. Everyone says that the divine fragrance talented lady is so and so, but only the god of fraud can see it clearly and understand it. What he wants to marry is a woman, a wife, not just a beauty, and definitely not an ancestor. No matter how beautiful a woman is, there will come a day when her beauty will decline. She will become a faded flower tomorrow. Even one day, she will become a pile of bones. Listening to the many voices, Shangguan Xiao was even more dumbfounded. As people had just said, Chu Yang had indeed proven himself, and he had proven himself time and time again, but he still refused to let it go. What did he rely on to be like this? Did he really think that Chu Yang would only marry Shangguan Lan? Did he really think that Chu Yang would be unable to extricate himself from Shangguan Lan? Did he really think that Chu Yang would not be able to live without Shangguan Lan? None of these were true. Shangguan Xiao knew clearly in his heart that there was an extremely crucial reason for his actions. He was biased against Chu Yang. He had always looked down on Chu Yang. This time, Chu Yang's actions could be said to be a slap to his face. Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo suddenly looked at each other in the huge noise. Then, they could not help but smile bitterly. Did they really have to marry Shangguan Lan? Why did they treat themselves as dog fart, or even less than dog fart, because of a mere Shangguan Lan? No wonder Shangguan Lan looked down on them. They all treated themselves as dog fart. How could Shangguan Lan like them? They are really not as good as that thing. I feel a little ashamed of my inferiority, not only in literary arts, but also in martial arts, and even in the field of women. If they were Chu Yang, they probably wouldn't be able to do such a thing as divorcing Shangguan Lan because they absolutely couldn't bear to do it. Whoosh whoosh. The two of them sighed in their hearts for a while before leaving. At this moment, they didn't know why, but Shangguan Lan's attractiveness to them suddenly fell to the bottom. Perhaps it was because even a person like Chu Yang couldn't get her approval, so the two of them probably couldn't either. So, they completely gave up. Ruizi also left. Everything that had happened today had given him a deeper understanding of Chu Yang. Huang Fuxian, Xie Xiaobo, Wang Lingyun, and the rest of the 6 great young masters of Taijing City suddenly became dispirited. After Kong Jingsha and Qin Guo left, they also quickly left. Because of Kong Jingsha, Qin Guo, and the rest, even more people left. However, most of them left while discussing. In front of Duke Ju's residence, the crowd that was initially packed with people had dispersed in an instant, leaving behind a large empty space. Only 2 people were still standing there, Shangguan Xiao and Shangguan Can. At this moment, Shangguan Xiao and Shangguan Can were still in a daze. They simply didn't know that a great danger was surging towards them. If they weren't careful, they would die without a burial ground. The news naturally spread quickly throughout Taijing City. At first, the entire Taijing City fell into a great shock. It could be said that the entire Taijing City was stunned. Chu Yang divorced the divine fragrance genius. How was this possible? The people of Taijing City were also in disbelief. Then, there was an uproar. Almost the entire Taijing City was discussing this matter. The reason for this was because the reputation of the divine fragrance genius Shangguanlan was too great. As people learned more and more details of the matter, after their shock and astonishment, many people sighed endlessly. It seemed that they were sighing for Chu Yang, but they were also sighing for themselves. Even a person like Chu Yang wasn't qualified to marry Shangguanlan, let alone them. Chapter 26:16. In Jinju, news of Chu Yang divorcing Shangguanlan would naturally arrive later. However, for some people, this did not exist. For example, the first prince, Huangfu Wuji. The first prince's residence. A study, an incomparably huge and luxurious study. At this moment, in front of the first prince, Huangfu Wuji, stood two neat rows of burly men. Each of them was like a god. They were all about the same height, and their faces were almost covered with curly beards. They were all dressed in white, and they all had a foot-wide leather belt tied around their waists. A silver scabbard with a black hilt was also inserted diagonally into the belt. The scabbard did not move, but the hands holding the scabbard moved. Each of them held a piece of paper in their hands. It was written in black and white. The paper was very soft, but at this moment, it was as straight as a white wooden plaque. Huangfu Wuji was lying on a recliner, and the folding fan in his hand was lightly tapping as he looked at the first row of black and white words on the white paper. Tasting spring tea, 3 sips of plain water. Kong Jingsha's first couplet was written on the first piece of paper. Huangfu Wuji glanced at it and could not immediately tell that it was a split couplet. He could not immediately match it. He immediately said coldly, "This Chu Yang really deserves to die. He was not as good as Chu Yang. Chu Yang naturally deserved to die. Show me the answer." As soon as he finished speaking, the person in front stepped back and the person behind took a step forward. The contents of the paper were imprinted in his eyes. Zhuxian Nunnery, 2 mountain men. Huangfu Wuji's expression turned even uglier. This match was simply too perfect. Moreover, that lowlife was matched up in an instant. This made him feel very uncomfortable in his heart, because the one who had such literary talent should be him. The lotus seed's heart is bitter. He looked at the next couplet. After successfully matching it, he compared it to Chu Yang's couplet, "Leah's stomach is bitter." His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. This was especially so when he realized that he had noticed that it was a homophonic couplet. He only matched the first meaning. Hai shui jiao 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 luo. Due to his anger, Huangfu Wuji read even faster. When he saw this couplet, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Kong Jingsha's couplet isn't just a little tricky." All of a sudden, his competitive spirit rose again. He did not immediately look at the couplet Chu Yang had given him. Instead, he began to ponder over it. However, when he excitedly matched his couplet and compared it with Chu Yang's couplet, the fan in his hand silently turned into powder. A few floors, supporting the eastern peak alone, unifying the distant mountains near the water, providing a painting, gathering the snow on the mountain ridge, scattering the white river smoke, such a long couplet made him realize once again that compared to Chu Yang, he was nothing more than a dog fart. "My superior awe-inspiring might, reveal the courage of a tiger. You despicable bastard. Show half of your head." As such, when he saw Kong Jingsha and Chu Yang's couplet, although Huangfu Wuji became more and more jealous of Chu Yang, he couldn't help but exclaim in delight. He was jealous of Chu Yang, but he definitely did not like Chu Yang. This was because Kong Jingsha's literary talent was also higher than his. Moreover, because he was repeatedly stumped by Kong Jingsha's couplets, Chu Yang suddenly came up with such a vulgar couplet. He felt very relieved. "Plant a tree in your house, use your bathtub with fish. Good. When the fish is ripe, enter my stomach." Your mother will personally cook. Haha. When he saw this, he couldn't help but laugh loudly again. Ugly. Kong Jingsha is about to faint from anger. It would be difficult for him to not be angered to death. Huang Fu Wuji was laughing happily. However, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared. He became extremely sinister. Kong Jingsha's literary talent is not as good as that bastard. I'm not as good as him. This is really good. Chapter 26:18. Master, the latest news, Chu Yang divorced Shangguan Lan. At this moment, the scholarly middle-aged man beside Huang Fu Wuji dashed in from the outside and reported the news to his master as fast as he could. Huang Fu Wuji was stunned when he heard the news. Then he looked at the middle-aged man and said in surprise, "What did you say? That bastard divorced Shangguan Lan?" He was very surprised because in his script, there was no such situation. Yes, master. The elegant middle-aged man was very alert. He immediately explained the situation. Then the surprise on Huang Fu Wuji's face disappeared and he fell into silence. This lowlife is not just arrogant, Yi Futian said. After a while, he turned to the scholarly middle-aged man and smiled strangely. He suddenly asked, "Why do you think Duke Ju is doing everything he can to stop me? Isn't it strange?" Hee. Master, I don't know. The elegant middle-aged man wouldn't say anything to such a lunatic even if he knew. Luckily, Huang Fu Wuji did not expect him to answer at all. He only smiled weirdly and said, "Things are getting more and more interesting. I'm very interested. So, remember to report to me as soon as you find out anything about this." "Yes, master." The elegant middle-aged man escaped again and couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Huang Fu Wuji was the person that Chu Yang cared about the most in this matter. And there was another person who cared about this very much, Shangguan Lan. After learning about Chu Yang's actions, Shangguan Lan didn't look sad. Instead, her beautiful eyes lit up and she couldn't help but ask, "Brother Yang, are you still going to do this?" She seemed to have expected that Chu Yang would do this. Of course, she knew very well what effect this would have. Duke Ju and the others tried their best to stop her from marrying Chu Yang. Naturally, they would be loyal and their danger would be reduced. Therefore, her danger would be reduced to the minimum. Shangguan Lan wasn't just guessing. In Chu Yang's 9 reincarnations, he had tried this once and the result was like this. The other result was that Chu Yang would become a mouse in the eyes of the first prince, the Jin Emperor. The first prince kept playing with the mouse, and Chu Yang kept enduring until he felt that he had accumulated enough strength. He took the initiative to kill the first prince and lure the Jin Emperor into a great battle. Chu Yang was amazing. Although he didn't kill the Jin Emperor, he successfully escaped. The Jin Emperor madly chased after Chu Yang in the heavenly spirit world and the god's world, but in the end, he still lost track of Chu Yang. Because of the huge threat Chu Yang posed, the Jin Emperor didn't want to leave such a hidden danger. He used Shangguan Lan as bait to force Chu Yang to appear, which led to Chu Yang being killed by the Jin Emperor. In this reincarnation, Shangguan Lan clearly knew that she was Chu Yang's fatal weakness. Because Chu Yang couldn't tolerate her being trampled on by the Jin Emperor, Chu Yang's family and friends were his weak spots. But because the Jin Emperor didn't notice them at the beginning, Chu Yang successfully moved and hid them. As for hiding Shangguan Lan, it was impossible because the Jin Emperor had been watching her. Shangguan Lan recalled every detail of Chu Yang's reincarnation. Many thoughts flashed through her mind. In the end, she anxiously stopped at one point. She was worried that those in the destiny would greatly affect Chu Yang's plan. For example, she wasn't in the destiny. Chapter 26:19. Because of her contemplation, the elegant courtyard where Shangguan Lan was in was completely quiet. Parrot and Xiaoguai had been sent away by her 6 days ago. Otherwise, it would be more lively at this time. Unfortunately, she only had Shangguan Mai by her side at this moment. After a while, the rapid sound of a peeper suddenly sounded in the silence. Shangguan Lan suddenly played the peeper, and it was ambush from 10 sides. Strong enough to pick up mountains, unparalleled in the world, unfavorable times but not dead. What can I do if not dead? What can I do if not dead? Farewell my concubine, what can I do? She and Chu Yang were so similar. Facing the Jin Emperor, they were surrounded by enemies from all sides and had no chance of survival. The reason why she thought of this was more important because of Chu Yang. The Jin Emperor set a trap for her. Chu Yang appeared and claimed to be the overlord Chu. Even if he was surrounded by enemies, he would still scare the Jin Emperor. In that reincarnation, she remembered every detail of that scene very clearly. She especially remembered that when Chu Yang was defeated and was about to die, he was narcissistic and boastful. He was a hero in life and a hero in death. Until now, she still remembered Chu Yang, unwilling to abandon a beauty, because, in that life, this was a rare smile on Chu Yang's face. It was rare that he was not serious. It seemed that when he was about to die, she was already by his side, although she was already a dead person at that time. Farewell my concubine, brother Yang will never let you feel it again. Shangguan Lan brushed the hair on her forehead. She did not look determined, but suddenly smiled gently, which suddenly made the world lose its color. In that life, in that battle, if she hadn't been a burden, Chu Yang definitely wouldn't have lost, let alone died. Perhaps, the fierce battle between Chu Yang and the Jin Emperor would last for a very long time, but she firmly believed that Chu Yang would win in the end. She even thought that if not for her, Chu Yang would not come out and wait for a good opportunity, and the Jin Emperor would die faster and more miserably. As for how miserably, when Shangguan Lan thought of this, she suddenly couldn't help but laugh, and then she muttered to herself, according to Brother Yang's character, it will definitely be very interesting. She was 100% sure that the Jin Emperor was absolutely miserable beyond word. Shangguan Mai, who was at the side, naturally noticed her young miss's abnormality. What was even more strange was that when Chu Yang divorced her young miss, not only did her young miss not resent him, but she was even more infatuated with that bastard, unable to extricate herself. What she didn't understand was what her young miss was thinking. Sometimes, it was as if he had lost his soul. Sometimes, he would suddenly laugh. It was as if he was laughing and crying at the same time. Especially the sorrow that he revealed, it really made her anxious. Miss, as soon as she opened her mouth, she was immediately interrupted by Shangguan Lan. You have to take good care of yourself in the future. As she spoke, Shangguan Lan suddenly realized something and immediately stopped talking. Miss, what are you talking about? Shangguan Mai inexplicably panicked, and she became abnormally anxious. Shangguan Lan smiled sweetly and comforted her. When I first heard that Brother Yang divorced me, I lost my soul and became a mess. You don't have to worry too much. But this matter can't always be delayed. If I don't ask Brother Yang, I will feel uneasy. I will be back soon. As she spoke, she left without a care in the world and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Shangguan Mai was stupefied there, but she became more and more uneasy and anxious. Suddenly, she thought of the parrot and Xiao Guari. She couldn't help but be shocked and exclaimed, "No, Miss must be going to do something. Why did Miss send the parrot and Xiao Guari away in advance? Did Miss know everything in advance? That's impossible. What happened? Miss, what are you going to do?" Chapter 2620. When Shangguan Mai found Duke Ju, Shangguan Lan had already disappeared. Then, Duke Ju's mansion immediately fell into great chaos. The news of Shangguan Lan's disappearance spread like wildfire. Soon, Taijing City was in an uproar. Caught off guard. Shangguan Lan's sudden disappearance caught Duke Ju's mansion off guard. The people in Taijing City were also caught off guard. Shangguan Lan disappeared just like that. No matter how hard they tried to find her, they couldn't find her. It was as if such a big living person had completely disappeared from the world. There was no trace of her. She disappeared cleanly without leaving any trace. Naturally, there were many discussions about this matter. Some people thought that Shangguan Lan was dead. Some people thought that Chu Yang abducted Shangguan Lan. Some people said that Shangguan Lan was forcing Duke Ju and the others. It seemed that every opinion was very logical and reasonable. However, no one in Duke Ju's family could understand because Shangguan Lan was definitely not such a person. In the chaos, Only Duke Ju faintly sensed something from Chu Yang and Shangguan Lan's actions. However, he didn't dare to think deeper. He had to think deeper. However, when he thought of this, he fell into boundless fear. His entire body was almost frozen. In the end, he thought of Chu Yang and Shangguan Lan's purpose. His heart was instantly so warm that it almost melted into water. Therefore, he only hoped that his guess was wrong and that such a terrible thing would never happen. He seemed to have a reason no one would know such a top-secret matter. At this time, no one knew the whereabouts of Shangguan Lan. However, there was one person who knew: a ghost. A ghost was naturally not a real ghost. However, it was a ghost arranged by the first prince to be by Shangguan Lan's side. She didn't know whether it was tall or short, old or young, male or female. The only thing that could be confirmed was that ghosts were very shocking, very shocking. As long as a ghost didn't want others to know of its existence, no one would know. Ghosts were actually defined like this: the great emperor was a human, and he was a ghost. Humans naturally couldn't see ghosts, so the great emperor naturally couldn't see this ghost. The reason why Shangguan Lan knew about ghosts was naturally through Chu Yang's 9 reincarnations. Because of this, Shangguan Lan had once rejoiced. Fortunately, she had discovered the existence of the ghost in time during Chu Yang's first reincarnation. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Because the ghost was by her side, the ghost knew her every move. Therefore, the ghost could even find out about the shocking things that Chu Yang had experienced from her. However, although she had known about the existence of ghosts in advance and had restrained herself greatly during the process of experiencing Chu Yang's 9 reincarnations, she was still worried that she would expose a great secret. Therefore, ghosts had to die. Ghosts had to die, but how did they die? How was she going to die in such a way that Chu Yang would feel the least guilty and implicate the people she loved the least? Huangfu Wuji, the avatar of the tyrannical ruler of the myriad gods world and the heavenly soul world, was like a psychopath because of his supreme power. What kind of reaction would he have if she died? Shangguan Lan thought about many things, but in the end, she still cared about Chu Yang's feelings the most. As for what Huangfu Wuji thought, she was too lazy to even think about it. Whatever he wanted, this psychopath would act up anyway. Therefore, after she left Duke Ju's residence, she had a beautiful smile on her face, a beautiful smile. When she smiled, it was as if the entire world smiled. Not only was it indescribably beautiful, it was also indescribably happy. That kind of smile, even the ghost in the dark, was no stranger to her smile that made the world pale in comparison. However, at this moment, it was as if it had lost its soul. It lost all thoughts in its mind and was completely stunned. Chapter 26-21. Shangguan Lan, who had been flying at high speed, suddenly flew to an area where the void suddenly collapsed and turned into a huge black hole in an instant. As soon as the black hole appeared, it swallowed everything. Shangguan Lan was caught off guard and rushed into it. She was directly swallowed by the black hole without even making a sound. She completely disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Gui Cai suddenly jolted and woke up in fright. Then, he was immediately horrified. The huge black hole was about to swallow him. No. The ghost struggled with all his might, but no matter what he did, it was to no avail. What was even more inconceivable was that he actually screamed in panic. He could die, but he absolutely couldn't scream. At his level, who could make him scream? Alas, he screamed uncontrollably as if he was about to be bitten to death by a ferocious tiger. "Master, save me." In the end, he asked his master for help, but it wasn't the first prince but the Jin Emperor. Only the Emperor could hear his screams and sense his danger. Only the Emperor had the ability to save him. The first prince was only a clone of the Emperor and didn't have the power to do so. Great Tomb. A voice came out of nowhere. It was a strange voice. Even though it was emotionless like the voice of the Heaven Duke, it was filled with horror at this moment. The world was heartless and treated all beings as dogs. The Heaven Duke was emotionless, but now, he was frightened to the extreme. This so-called Great Tomb was absolutely frightening. Why is the Epoch Tomb connected to this place? When was this hole formed? The Heaven Duke's voice murmured. He didn't do anything, but Gui was rescued. However, only half of his body was left. Even the Emperor couldn't save him completely. As for Gui, he was just a ghost without a physical body. Half of his body floated around like a ghost. When he heard the words Great Tomb, especially the Epoch Tomb, he was scared out of his wits. He finally understood why someone like him was so frightened and even screamed. It was because this was the Great Tomb of the Epoch. A resting place after the end of the era. To be exact, the tomb was the end of all epochs. Not to mention him, even the Jin Emperor wouldn't be able to survive after being sucked in. Shangguan Lan knows that there is a Great Tomb here. She wants to use the Great Tomb to kill me? Such a question immediately popped up in the ghost's mind. If Shangguan Mai could detect Shangguan Lan's abnormality, how could he not? Of course, he also knew the secret identities of Chu Yang and Shangguan Lan. Otherwise, how could he be so sensitive? Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that if it weren't for him, Shangguan Lan wouldn't even have the chance to say goodbye to the person closest to her. As expected, there is more than one place, and there is no pattern to it, and it is randomly generated. Heaven Duke's voice rang out again. Ghost was shocked again and immediately threw all questions related to Shangguan Lan to the back of his mind. Compared to the Great Tomb, Shangguan Lan's matter was not a matter at all. Deformities will eventually die prematurely and won't last long. Looks like I can't delay any longer. This was the Jin Emperor's last words. His voice then completely disappeared. As for Shangguan Lan's matter, he absolutely wouldn't care about such a trivial matter. Ghost also knew very well that he had to tell the first prince about Shangguan Lan's matter. Ghost also quickly disappeared. He absolutely didn't want to stay in this damned place for even half a second. Although this wasn't the real Great Tomb, it was only a passage. Chapter 26-22. Ghost didn't say anything else and didn't voice his suspicions either. The reason was very simple, the Jin Emperor. According to the Jin Emperor's judgment, the entrance to the tomb appeared randomly. If he didn't know, how could Shangguan Lan know? Thus, this could only be a coincidence. When the Crown Prince Huangfu Wuji learned that Shangguan Lan had been devoured by the Great Necropolis, he flew into a rage. The news quickly spread, and more people learned about it. Eventually, it was no longer a secret. Sunset. When the sun was at its reddest, Chu Yang left Taijing City and stayed in a small temple by the river. He looked listlessly at the lonely green hills, the surging river, the winding paths, and the splashing like moss stains. In the end, his gaze fell to his feet. He stared blankly at his feet, which were illuminated by the setting sun. His mind was in a trance. He did not know what he was doing, nor did he know what he was thinking. Of course, he also heard the news of Shangguan Lan's death. He wanted to laugh it off because it was impossible. This had never happened before in the 9 reincarnations. However, he didn't know why he felt so uneasy. Especially when the sunset was at its reddest, it meant that the sun was about to set. The day was about to end, and the night was about to fall. What about the person? Did Shangguan Lan really sink like the setting sun? Chu Yang didn't want to go, but he couldn't help but think about it. Because that was Shangguan Lan, the woman he liked, and because it involved the Great Tomb. Of course, he knew about the tomb because it could be considered his comrade against the Jin Emperor. During the 9 reincarnations, Li Jie was able to kill the Jin Emperor because he was distracted by the tomb. However, he didn't know much about this comrade. He only knew that the Great Necropolis was the final destination of everything, but he didn't know the specifics. He didn't even know how the tomb restrained the Jin Emperor and what kind of effect it had on him. Moreover, the tomb appeared earlier than expected. In other words, fate has changed again. Chu Yang finally knew the reason for his uneasiness and fear. If fate had changed, then the woman he loved might really be dead. But how could this be? Why did something that didn't happen? He couldn't find the reason, but soon, he shuddered as if he had been struck by lightning. Lan isn't in fate either. If Shangguan Lan was also not part of fate, then the 9 lives of the 9 lives of reincarnation would naturally deviate greatly. Swish. Chu Yang's face turned as pale as paper. It was as if all the bones in his body had been pulled out. He suddenly had no support and didn't know what to do. Not only did he lose his support, but he also thought of an even more terrifying possibility: the Jinn Emperor might not be in fate at all. In this way, his so-called future, when he came into contact with the reincarnation cycle, was nothing more than his own entertainment. It was nothing more than a big joke, and even less bullshit. However, he was actually stupid enough to only discover such a huge flaw now, causing him to almost fall into a state of eternal damnation. Am I a pig? He didn't even blame himself for wasting time. He just cursed and began to think about everything. Soon, he was the first to confirm a few points. First, the Jinn Emperor shouldn't be in fate. The 9 reincarnations were much less useful in predicting the future. The Jinn Emperor should be more terrifying than he imagined. Secondly, everything had to be reconsidered. Everything had to be redone. Finally, and most importantly, he had to confirm if the Great Tomb had really appeared. To be more precise, was Shangguan Lan really dead? Shangguan Lan's life was the most important thing. Nothing else mattered. I don't know, but someone will tell me. Swish. Chapter 26-23. The news of the tomb came from Huangfu Wuji. The news of Shangguan Lan being swallowed by the tomb and dying in it also came from Huangfu Wuji. In the end, everything converged on Huangfu Wuji, so the solution to the problem naturally lay with Huangfu Wuji. He didn't need to look for Huangfu Wuji. If Shangguan Lan was really dead, then Huangfu Wuji would definitely come looking for him. As for the reason, it was very simple. If Shangguan Lan was dead, how could he still be alive? Therefore, Chu Yang only wanted to find the tomb that swallowed Shangguan Lan. The search for the tomb was much easier than he thought because there were many people who wanted to confirm Shangguan Lan's life and death. And to confirm Shangguan Lan's life and death, the prerequisite was whether the tomb really existed. With so many people wanting to confirm this, things naturally became much easier. However, things became easier, but Chu Yang's heart completely sank. Not only did the tomb really appear, but it was also constantly evolving and growing, so that soon everyone could see it. The tomb was not very far from Taijing City, so it could be seen from afar. In the west of Taijing City, there seemed to be a giant beast opening its ferocious mouth, constantly swallowing everything in the world, causing the whole world to become dark, and even caused a great panic, which caused Shangguan Lan's death to fade away very quickly. Chu Yang had no interest in such a big event. He had no interest in the possibility of the world being destroyed. After confirming that the tomb had appeared, he still couldn't believe it, so he sneaked into Duke Ju's residence. By the time he snuck out of Duke Ju's residence, he had completely lost interest in everything and was running toward the tomb in a daze. The tomb represented death, disaster, destruction, and end. Everyone's expression changed when they talked about it, but he couldn't wait to rush over. There was no one in this direction, and there was no living creature. Along the way, in the direction of the tomb, the grey color became more and more obvious, and the airflow became more and more obvious. The airflow from all directions was heading towards the tomb. Huff huff, Chu Yang continued to move forward. He was still very far away from the great tomb, but the airflow had already turned into a whistling gale. After entering such an area, the vegetation had already withered and died. Even the slightest touch would turn them into flying ash. At this time, Chu Yang also clearly felt that the life energy in his body was constantly being sucked away. He was familiar with this feeling, so he was able to deal with it calmly. After he madly dashed forward for a while, the wind disappeared, the airflow disappeared, and the light became extremely dim. The whole world had turned into a deathly grey. Everything was deathly grey. He even felt that the ground under his feet seemed to have turned into deathly grey dust. He felt as if he would immediately sink if he stepped on it. After that, Chu Yang found himself in a completely grey world, and everything in it seemed to have turned grey dust. Even he seemed to have turned into grey dust, floating in the air. Clang! Chu Yang felt that the devouring power coming from the front had suddenly increased by another level. It had become incomparably huge. He almost couldn't control his body and was about to be devoured. Finally, he had no choice but to stop and stare blankly at the front. He stared at the huge black hole. Chapter 26-24. The world was deathly silent. Chu Yang was in a daze amidst the endless grey. He slowly became mysterious and gloomy. Soon, he didn't look like a living person with flesh and blood. Instead, he looked like a ghost or a transformed form of grey dust. His eyes were fixated on the tomb in front of him. Suddenly, he felt that the soft grey dust was cold, hard, and extremely ferocious, like giant mouths ready to eat people. At this moment, his heart seemed to be cold, hard, and ferocious because this was the only way to prevent himself from being devoured by these ferocious mouths. However, he felt that he didn't seem to be aware of human sorrow. It was as if he had never loved anyone in his life, never had any relatives or friends, let alone enemies. It was as if he had never had anything, not even himself. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Yang was frozen in place. During these 7 days and nights, he frantically thought about how to deal with the Jin Emperor, not daring to give himself the slightest chance to think about anything else. He was doing his best to avoid something. During these 7 days, the world didn't get any worse. The devouring power of the tomb was rapidly weakening. It was clear that the Jin Emperor had taken action. On the 8th day, this part of the world became even better. Sunlight could once again casually shine in, dispelling the deathly grey color of this place. At the same time, apart from sunshine, another person had finally arrived. This person had a majestic figure and a majestic appearance, as aloof as a mountain. His cold eyes shot out starlight while his curved brows were painted. He stepped forward like a demon lord descending from the heavens, the Taisui god of the mortal world. He seemed to be smiling yet not smiling, and seemed to be angry yet not angry. His starry eyes fell on Chu Yang's body. When he saw that Chu Yang's body was petrified and didn't move for a long time, the corners of his mouth finally raised into a happy smile. "He's here." Chu Yang didn't look back, but he already knew who it was. "You know who I am. You knew that I would come." The smile on that person's face disappeared in an instant. That half smile, half anger, and half anger instantly became clear. In an instant, it seemed as if he couldn't wait to pounce on Chu Yang and eat him alive bit by bit. Other than that, he was also surprised. Chu Yang knew of him and knew that he would definitely come. He was extremely surprised. Haha. Chu Yang didn't explain and only chuckled. However, this chuckle was very different from before. Although it was as mocking as before, it was now filled with endless gnashing of teeth and hatred. It was as if one could see a pair of scarlet eyes upon hearing this chuckle. The person who came saw such a pair of scarlet eyes. However, when Chu Yang turned around, Chu Yang's eyes were not scarlet at all. There was only contempt, indifference, and deathly stillness. He was surprised again. The newcomer was naturally Huangfu Wuji, the Huangfu Wuji that Chu Yang had been waiting for 7 days and 7 nights. "It seems that you know a lot about me. I'm very surprised." Facing Chu Yang's disrespect, Huangfu Wuji was furious. The hatred in his eyes deepened and his gaze was like a poisonous sword. "There will be many surprises for you. For example, you will die here today." Chapter 26-25. "You want me to die here?" Huangfu Wuji's expression suddenly turned ferocious and fierce. "Bastard, how dare you? You know who I am, so you should know what to do. Kneel down and cry right now and I'll let you die a quick death." "Huangfu Wuji, how dare you play this game in front of me? Are you even a beginner?" Chu Yang sneered in disdain. "Who is the expert in mental illness? You should continue to be envious of me, understand? You're courting death." Haha. Huangfu Wuji was furious, and was about to attack. But, Chu Yang suddenly burst into laughter, and he couldn't help but stop. "Huangfu Wuji." Chu Yang sneered, I'm crazy, I'm reckless, I'm a game, and so on. How am I compared to you? You may look like me, but you're just playing a game while I'm living my life. The difference between heaven and earth is like heaven and earth. Yours is just a joke." Huangfu Wuji was the Jin Emperor's avatar, the the highest ruler in both the heavenly spirit world and the gods' world. What could he play? He could only die of loneliness and boredom because he was invincible. It was too easy for him to get anything he wanted. Bastard, your understanding of me is far beyond my imagination. You've surprised me again. Huangfu Wuji was flabbergasted once again and felt even more confused. The despicable person in front of him seemed to be himself and knew everything about him very well. Of course, what the other party said was not wrong at all. He had once compared the way the two of them did things. Chu Yang also did things according to his own preferences, but the results were completely different. Because he did not have the weight of life, it was just a game. Naturally, it was boring, and of course, it would definitely not be exciting. This was caused by status. Therefore, he was not only envious of Chu Yang, he was jealous of him to death. To be exact, this was what he couldn't tolerate the most about Chu Yang. Chu Yang didn't have supreme status, so how could he live so freely? Accident. Now is not the time to talk about accidents. Chu Yang stared at Huangfu Wuji as though he was looking at a dead man. He then pointed at Huangfu Wuji and said, Lan Lan died because of you. I want you to die without a complete corpse. Impudent. How dare you blame me? What kind of status did Huangfu Wuji have? Not only did Chu Yang look down on him, he even used his supreme status to declare him guilty. This was something he couldn't accept at all. However, Chu Yang's next sentence stunned him. Lan Lan, looks like you're really dead. With such a sentence, he heard too much information. That bastard was actually not sure that Shangguan Lan was dead until just now. He even had fantasies in his heart. After Huangfu Wuji lost the first move, he naturally became even more furious. He couldn't help but want to capture Chu Yang and torture him to death. However, in the blink of an eye, he started to laugh coldly again. Bastard, if you didn't divorce Shangguan Lan, would Shangguan Lanqi have died? After a pause, he sneered even more and accused even more. Who are you blaming? You are the one who killed Shangguan Lan. You are the murderer. Crack. Chu Yang's body trembled, and his teeth made ka sounds. He did make a wrong judgment. His foresight in the future led to this. If he wasn't so confident in everything he saw in the reincarnation, everything would be completely different. Haha. Seeing Chu Yang in pain, Huangfu Wuji was very happy and laughed loudly. How could killing a person be compared to making this person suffer? He still felt that it was not enough. Bastard, as a man, you can't even protect the woman who loves you deeply. What kind of shit are you? You are just a piece of trash who only deserves to kneel at my feet and bark. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? Chapter 26-26. Haha. In the face of Huangfu Wuji's bitter mockery and sharp pain, Chu Yang suddenly laughed crazily in his grief and indignation. Especially when Shangguan Lan's voice and smile appeared in his mind, the tearing pain in his heart suddenly became boundless. When it was boundless and deep, he laughed crazily. In the end, he looked up to the sky and roared crazily, venting crazily. At this moment, his vocal cords were almost torn apart. That roar reverberated endlessly in this deathly grey world. Then, Chu Yang slowly calmed down, and even made Huangfu Wuji stunned as he recited a poem. From tomorrow onwards, I will be a happy person. Feed the horses, chop firewood, and travel the world. From tomorrow onwards, I will care about food and vegetables. I have a house, facing the sea, where the spring flowers bloom. What kind of bullshit poem is this? Feeding the horses and chopping firewood is a big deal, but travel the world my ass. Food and vegetables need to be cared about, but is it important to have a house? Facing the sea, where the spring flowers bloom? What is so special about it that it is worth your hoarse voice to emphasize it? Huangfu Wuji felt that he was already temperamental, reckless, and lawless enough, so much so that he looked like a lunatic. However, he found that Chu Yang was even more temperamental and lunatic than him. At this time, he actually made such a mess. This had always been unique to him. He had always been the only one who was so crazy in front of others, doing things that were impossible. However, this unique thing of his was now snatched away by someone else. The most unbearable thing was that he found that Chu Yang was even more egotistical than him. He thought that he was the best in the world, and did not put anyone in his eyes. Huangfu Wuji's starry eyes instantly turned cold, but when he heard Chu Yang's monologue again, he could not help but be stunned again. For a period of time, I don't understand why I keep criticizing myself, blaming myself, and even loathing and hating myself. Is it because I'm not good enough? But to me, the person who loves me the most should be myself. However, why have I become like this? Am I not satisfied with myself? But why am I not dissatisfied with myself? In the end, I sort of figured it out. Because I couldn't satisfy all of you, I was dissatisfied with myself. For example, Chu Yang smiled and pointed at Huangfu Wuji. Take you for example. You said that I was trash, and I couldn't refute that. It seems to be true. So from then on, I decided that I would never blame myself or hate myself anymore. But I haven't done something like this for a long time, so I'll do it to my heart's content today. Chu Yang, you are a piece of trash. Chu Yang, you #yuan% yuan are a coward. Huangfu Wuji was dumbfounded. Ghost and the others who were following Huangfu Wuji in the dark were also dumbfounded. Chu Yang's reasons seemed to be very strong and reasonable, but what he said seemed to be illogical. No one knew what he was talking about. Moreover, what was he doing? He was so crazy that even a lunatic would feel ashamed of himself and admit that he was inferior. Soon, Huangfu Wuji, Ghost, and the others had completely different thoughts. Ghost and the others were extremely shocked. There was such a person in this world. What a weirdo. Huangfu Wuji was extremely angry. Chu Yang was originally crazier than him, but now he was going to go one step further. This made his craziness seem even less frivolous, even more chaotic, and even more meaningless. To be exact, his craziness was true craziness. He was really a lunatic, while Chu Yang was really unrestrained and extremely carefree. Chapter 26-27. Huangfu Wuji roared crazily, "Bastard! That's enough. I'm sorry for making you feel inferior and miserable. I'm very sorry." Chu Yang suddenly became a gentleman again and apologized politely. His words and actions were very elegant, but his voice became hoarse. Don't be too angry, because I'm going to say something that's not crazy." Chu Yang clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. But then, he suddenly became frivolous again and said with a smile, "You little thing, I'm going to kill you. Then, I'll lure your father to the Jin Emperor and use the Great Tomb to kill your father too. In this way, it won't be a loss for a genius like me to die. Don't you think so?" The ghost in the dark was speechless. Finally, he said in his heart, "This is definitely a lunatic." He was not the only one who thought so. Those who secretly followed Huangfu Wuji were also frightened by Chu Yang. Chu Yang was even crazier and crazier than Huangfu Wuji. As for Huangfu Wuji, after hearing Chu Yang's words, he was so angry that he couldn't say anything. He could only laugh loudly. Chu Yang slowly recited for him, "Give a warm name to every river and every mountain stranger. I also wish you well, may you have a bright future. I wish you a happy ending for your lover. May you find happiness in the mortal world. I only wish to face the sea and enjoy the warm spring flower." Good, good, good. Huangfu Wuji was so angry that his heart and liver were about to explode. Ever since he was born, he had never loathed someone so much and hated someone so much. Of course. Boom. While speaking, Chu Yang suddenly exerted strength under his feet. The ground instantly exploded, like a star falling on the earth, forming a scene of destruction, a scene of doomsday. With such strength, Chu Yang appeared in front of Huangfu Wuji in an instant. He punched at Huangfu Wuji's nose with a simple and extremely violent punch. This punch was completely different from the previous one. It had no power, just like the punches used by street gangsters. Moreover, it seemed that Chu Yang's fighting skills were still very poor. He only knew how to hit his opponent's weak spots. Although Huangfu Wuji was extremely furious and seemed to have lost all rationality, his mind was clearer than anyone else. Epoch Fist. The Epoch Fist was very simple. It was to control an epoch and throw a punch. As far as Huangfu Wuji knew, this lowly Chu Yang had at least mastered 3 epochs: the Confucian epoch, the immortal epoch and the shaman epoch. This was child's play. Others might not know, but how could Huangfu Wuji not know? Roar. Immediately, a heaven-shaking dragon's roar was heard. It reverberated through heaven and earth, as if it was going to pierce through heaven and earth. At the same time, endless golden light burst out from Huangfu Wuji's body, dispelling the deathly grey around him and dyeing everything into a noble golden color. 9 golden 5-clawed golden dragons also appeared in an instant, surrounding him and protecting him in the center. In the face of Chu Yang's punch, he also punched out. His fist struck out like a dragon. As he punched out, a 5-clawed golden dragon that was 90,000 miles long appeared behind him and blasted towards Chu Yang along with the punch. The dragon's roar filled the sky, and the golden dragon's aura filled the world. The 90,000 miles long 5-clawed golden dragon could be seen everywhere in Central State. It shook the entire Central State as they felt the wrath of the emperor. Huangfu Wuji, the eldest prince of the Jin dynasty, was naturally a dragon, and was related to the emperor. How many people in the heavenly spirit world could withstand such an attack? Who would dare to not submit to such a majesty of the emperor? However, as soon as the two came into contact, Huangfu Wuji's fist directly exploded into pieces with a muffled bang. His flesh and bones were all turned into a bloody pulp that splattered in all directions. His entire arm even exploded into pieces one by one, and in the end, it all turned into a bloody pulp and exploded into pieces. Chapter 26-28. Boom. Huangfu Wuji was sent flying a few thousand miles away. Everything in his path exploded into pieces. The 90,000 miles long golden dragon in the sky was now like a huge snake, its body convulsing. On the other hand, Chu Yang was calm and composed. He didn't seem to have suffered any impact. It was as if he hadn't punched Huangfu Wuji, but had kicked him away like a pebble. Victory and defeat were decided immediately, and the superior was decided immediately. Huangfu Wuji was not Chu Yang's match at all. There was nothing strange about this. Chu Yang had cultivated to an extremely high level during his 9 reincarnation cycles and could even kill the emperor several times. Huangfu Wuji was no match for him. Even though Chu Yang didn't have that kind of power, he already had a high level of understanding and comprehension. The only thing he needed was to increase his power. With this understanding, it wasn't difficult to increase his power. This was more than enough to deal with Huangfu Wuji. Huangfu Wuji was the emperor's avatar, but it was a special one. Huangfu Wuji was created by the emperor by splitting a part of his soul into reincarnation. This allowed him to be full of humanity, but at the same time, he was also greatly limited in terms of power. Of course, Huangfu Wuji could borrow the emperor's power at any time and could even summon him. Once the Jin emperor appeared, Chu Yang was no match for him. However, Chu Yang wasn't worried about this at all. He even hoped that this would be the case. His goal at this moment was not only Huangfu Wuji but also the emperor. He wanted to drag the emperor into the tomb. What he said to Huangfu Wuji earlier was at least 80% true, because he felt that he only had a 20% chance of survival after entering the tomb. The tomb was one of the few methods that Chu Yang hadn't tried during his 9 reincarnations. He felt that this was the only place where he could find the power to kill the emperor's true body. As for other methods, such as using the River of Fate to return to the past and kill the emperor when he was still weak, Chu Yang had tried them all. Of course, there was another method that he had never tried before, the world where the divine cauldron was located. Entering the world of the god cauldron was a taboo, and he had a feeling that it would be about as dangerous as the Great Necropolis. That was why he had chosen it. The Great Tomb was the place where Shangguan Lan died. Even if he failed and died in the Great Tomb, he would be buried with Shangguan Lan, which was a bit of consolation. Trash, can you come back quickly? If you don't come back, I'll go see my Lan Lan and make you regret it for the rest of your life. With his hands behind his back, Chu Yang looked at Huangfu Wuji from afar. A joyful smile appeared on his face as he mocked with a hoarse voice. Lowlife, I'm going to kill you. Ah! Huangfu Wuji suffered a great blow and crazily screamed in the distance. Ha. Chu Yang laughed and said, "What a joke. That sentence of yours is really too weak. It seems that your previous opponents were too weak. They didn't train you properly. Rumble. Heaven and earth trembled and rumbled in the distance like rolling thunder in the sky. Huangfu Wuji quickly returned. During this process, all of his injuries had healed. His arm that had been blown apart had grown back in the blink of an eye as well. Chu Yang didn't care about this at all. The entire heavenly spirit world was the backing of the first prince, so it would be strange if he couldn't do this. Chapter 26-29. Chu Yang's words were even more vicious than his fists. Each of his words pierced into Huangfu Wuji's heart. Huangfu Wuji was so angry that he was about to explode. He roared, "Bastard, do you have such ability? You're still not convinced. Call your father." Chu Yang's smile became even wider. However, his nerves were constantly on edge. Once the Jin Emperor appeared, he would immediately be in danger. He wouldn't be able to enter the tomb even if he wanted to. The inheritances of your epochs have all been destroyed. Only a bit of trash is left, not even enough to prolong their feeble existence. Meanwhile, the entire heavenly spirit world is mine. How are you going to fight me? Accompanied by this furious voice, Huangfu Wuji was already close to Chu Yang. Along the path he took back, the void shattered like glass. Countless spatial fragments flew and swirled chaotically. Of course, he was telling the truth. The Confucian and immortal epochs that Chu Yang relied on were indeed destroyed. For example, the previous dynasty. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Yang was nothing more than using the treasures left behind by the previous dynasty to rebel. Dragon, 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 I am the true dragon, the king of the heaven and earth. Huangfu Wuji had arrived. His voice seemed to be the command of the earthly king, the order of the grand Tao, and the will of the heaven and earth. The 9 golden dragons drilled out from the spatial storm and surrounded him once more. At the same time, he punched towards Chu Yang again. When he punched out, a golden dragon immediately appeared and coiled around his arm. It held an entire world in its mouth and blasted towards his fist. The golden dragon coiling around his arm seemed to be the golden dragon that was 90,000 miles long in the sky just now. It was incomparably shocking, and the world in its mouth was not illusory. It was a real world, as if it was the world of dragons. In the blink of an eye, the dragon's roar shattered the void and destroyed the world. If this was any other place, countless living beings would have exploded and died. Fortunately, this was the entrance of the tomb. Everything had been destroyed long ago. Chu Yang stared at the noiseless void and Huangfu Wuji's shocking attack. His expression didn't change. He calmly put one hand behind his back and smiled. I'll only use one hand. Otherwise, when your father comes, he'll say that I'm bullying a child. Boom. As he spoke, his right hand didn't move at all. It simply moved forward and accurately met Huangfu Wuji's fist. Lowlife, you're courting death. Too disdainful. Using one hand to block, he was treating Huangfu Wuji like a child. Huangfu Wuji's eyes were about to explode from anger. He exerted more strength in his rage. His fist became heavier, more powerful, more tyrannical, and more tyrannical, emitting a golden light that could cut through the void. Bang! Huangfu Wuji's fist slammed into Chu Yang's hand. Contrary to his expectations, Chu Yang's hand didn't explode. Chu Yang's entire body was blown apart. That thin hand seemed to be stronger and heavier than the entire celestial spirit world. The golden dragon on his arm and the world in the golden dragon's mouth were unable to resist at all. They were directly swallowed by the thin palm. Huangfu Wuji's entire body shook. Even his pupils were trembling. The fury on his face completely disappeared, and it was replaced by shock. He was frightened. Chapter 26-30. What are you wondering? Pa. Chu Yang clasped his hands together and grabbed Huangfu Wuji's fist. He wasn't the least bit surprised by this. The Confucian, immortal, and witchcraft epochs had been destroyed, leaving behind only the treasures. However, there were many worlds in Chu Yang's body. His 21 souls had formed 21 worlds. The worlds formed by the Destiny twins were especially powerful. Once these worlds fused with the legacies of the Confucian epoch, immortal epoch, and witchcraft epoch, wouldn't it mean that the Confucian epoch, immortal epoch, and witchcraft epoch would reappear? Moreover, Chu Yang's flesh shell was a world. There were thousands of worlds above the three-dimensional coordinates in his body. Even if the worlds in his body were not strong enough, how could the worlds created by Huangfu Wuji compare to them when they were stacked together? Therefore, there was no illusion. Moreover, Chu Yang did not use these worlds in the past and could not unleash the power of these worlds. However, after going through 9 reincarnations, his comprehension and vision were different. If he could only unleash 10% of the power of these worlds in the past, now he could unleash 100% of the power, or even 1,000 or 10,000 times. Hurry up and call your father. Huangfu Wuji had never been a match for him, no matter when it was. As he spoke, Chu Yang suddenly exerted strength in his hand. Huangfu Wuji's fist immediately exploded like a piece of tofu. Bang! He then punched Huangfu Wuji's nose bridge. Huangfu Wuji's nose disappeared in an instant. Amid the intense pain, sour, sweet, spicy, and so on burst out. Bang bang! Then, Chu Yang punched Huangfu Wuji's eyes twice, causing his eyeballs to explode and explode. In an instant, Huangfu Wuji's Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn all appeared. Bang! Chu Yang punched Huangfu Wuji again. Huangfu Wuji's head was instantly smashed, and his brain juice splattered out. He hurriedly apologized, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to smash your head. I just wanted you to call your father out." After a pause, he looked at Ghost and the others, who were hidden in the void, and said, "Everyone, please don't get too excited. Don't worry, this thing won't die for the time being unless I'm sure that his father won't come out." With Chu Yang's current realm, the strength of his punch was so great that no one could survive from it. However, even if Huangfu Wuji was smashed into pieces, he wouldn't die so easily. To be precise, Chu Yang could not kill Huangfu Wuji without using his trump card. Heaven's decree. Huangfu Wuji's brain juice had been beaten out of his head, but he could still roar as if nothing had happened. Furthermore, the terrifying injuries on his body had healed in an instant. His nose that had been smashed had returned to its original state, his eyes that had been smashed had returned to its original state, and even his battered head had returned to its original state in an instant. Rumble. Above the firmament, thunder rumbled. Heaven was enraged. Heaven was truly enraged because Huangfu Wuji was the son of heaven. Rumble. A bolt of lightning struck down directly. The lightning illuminated the central continent. The heaven and earth were incomparably blazing as they shook violently. That extremely dazzling lightning tore open the void directly. Like a giant axe, it ruthlessly chopped down on Chu Yang's body. However, it seemed that the lightning was bigger than the rain. Chu Yang was unscathed from such a blow. At the same time, a decree appeared above Huangfu Wuji's head. It floated there, surrounded by endless thunder, and the 9-tiered heavens appeared. Chapter 26:31. The Heaven's Edict, the symbol of controlling the heaven and earth. When a great emperor placed his heart and soul in the heaven and earth, he would form the Heaven's Edict. Taking another step forward, he would be able to live as long as the heaven and earth with boundless power. As long as he was in the Tianhan world, no one would be able to match him. Huangfu Wuji was not a great emperor, but because he was the avatar of the Jin Emperor, he was actually more frightening and terrifying than a great emperor. This was clearly reflected on Chu Yang. The moment the Heaven's Edict appeared, the heaven and earth crazily squeezed and crushed Chu Yang. To Chu Yang, the entire world seemed to have turned into a giant grinder. What's the use of this? Buzz buzz buzz. Chu Yang's body slightly shook, and a layer of precious light blossomed from his body. The pressure and grinding of the heaven and earth stopped in an instant. It seemed as if the power source of this huge grinding machine had been pulled out. This thing, I can clearly tell you that my path is similar to that of an immortal. I emphasize on myself, not relying on the heaven and earth, only relying on myself. In the end, I will transcend the entire Tianhan world. If the heaven dies, I will not age. If the heaven dies, I will not die. Pa. Chu Yang paused. He raised his hand and slapped Huangfu Wuji's face. He sneered, "Now, can you call me father?" "Hehe, this has two meanings. First, you can call me father, but I don't have an unfilial son like you. Second, hurry up and call me father, understand?" Huangfu Wuji covered his burning right cheek. His crazed and angry expression suddenly disappeared. Although he was still gloomy and cold, he was more calm and serene, as well as calm and steady. His gaze was extremely dignified as he stared at Chu Yang. "You shouldn't be able to control this kind of power at your level." His transformation was very shocking. He had never been crazy, nor was he crazy. The reason why he was temperamental was because he had no scruples and was lawless. However, at this time, he seemed to have met the law, met the heavens. This was caused by the change in power. Chu Yang was all too clear about this. The reason why he could do this was naturally the accumulation of 9 reincarnations. You're just a piece of trash, so you can only understand the matters of trash. You won't understand anything else even if I tell you. He sneered and raised his hand to grab Huangfu Wuji's neck in front of him. Although Huangfu Wuji wanted to dodge, he couldn't. Keek. Without any suspense, Chu Yang grabbed Huangfu Wuji by the neck and lifted him up. Huangfu Wuji let out a strange noise from his throat and stuck out his long tongue. "Since you don't want to call your father, I'll do it for you." Chu Yang lifted Huangfu Wuji up high and shouted towards the sky, "Jin Emperor, your son is in my hands. If you don't come out now, I'll strangle him to death." "How dare you?" Suddenly, an emotionless voice came from the heaven and earth. It wasn't very loud and didn't seem to have any power. However, once it entered Chu Yang's ears, he immediately started bleeding from his 7 orifices. His body shook violently as great fear and reverence appeared in his heart. He couldn't help but want to kneel down immediately. Along with this voice, a grand force erupted from his body. It seemed to want to blow him into ashes in the blink of an eye. It was as if it wanted to treat him as dirt and directly erase him. This force seemed to have transcended all laws of matter and turned everything into an illusion. It could do whatever it wanted and achieve whatever it wanted. It was indescribable. The Tao could be said, but it was not the Tao. An indescribable Tao didn't have 1,000th of its mysteries. Jin Emperor. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.